Chapter 173. But at this moment, Hu Po's situation didn't seem too good. A huge gray eagle stood in front of him, looking down at him. The eagle's eyes revealed a scrutinizing look, as if it was considering whether this little thing in front of it could be eaten. Hu Po's body was very sturdy, but compared to the gray eagle in front of him, it paled in comparison. Compared to the two fierce beasts, Hu Po was only the size of the eagle's claw. This showed the gray eagle's size. Lu Yi remembered what Li Baxin said before. Although there were no disciples in charge of the blue blood sect's encampment, there was still a fierce beast that the sects in the outer circle generally couldn't take down. It seemed that this gray eagle was the fierce beast that fourth senior brother mentioned. Before entering, neither his second senior sister nor fourth senior brother specifically explained the situation of this fierce beast, so it seemed that this gray eagle wasn't much of a threat to him. Thinking so, Lu Yi hurriedly walked forward. The gray eagle sensed him and turned to look at Lu Yi, the scrutinizing look in its eyes growing stronger. Hu Po also saw Lu Yi and turned around to stand between him and the gray eagle. Beside him, there was a cultivator looking at this scene with a headache. "Is it Azure Sea Mountain's senior brother?" Lu Yi stepped forward and asked. This person wasn't weak, at least a ninth-order cultivator with an Earth-grade secret art. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to escort Hu Po all the way here. Yes, the person nodded slightly. "Greetings, senior brother." Lu Yi bowed. "Thank you for escorting me all the way here, senior brother." The person smiled. It was just on the way. He looked Lu Yi up and down and praised, "Junior brother Yi is really talented. The Battle of Golden Light Peak made me yearn for you." Lu Yi said humbly, "Senior brother is too kind. It's over. I'll really have to walk the 9 states with the name of Yi in the future." The two exchanged a few more pleasantries. The Azure Sea Mountain cultivator still had matters to attend to, so he took his leave. Lu Yi expressed his gratitude again. Watching him leave, Lu Yi raised his head to look at the gray eagle standing next to him. The other party also lowered his head to look at him, then bent down and gently touched Lu Yi's head with its beak. Lu Yi didn't know what it meant, but it flapped its wings and flew away, quickly landing on a mountain peak not far away. After Gray Eagle left, Hu Po finally relaxed. He walked to Lu Yi's side and rubbed his head against her. "Let's go, I'll take you to the Jade Blood Sect." Lu Yi patted Hu Po's head. These words were directed at both Hu Po and Ti. Ignoring the surprised gazes of the rogue cultivators along the way, Lu Yi directly returned to the Heaven's Secret Hall and fiddled with the Heaven's Secret Pillar. Before he came in, second senior sister told him to get a pet contract from here, but he didn't know how to get one. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Jade Blood Sect's disciple Lu Yi, respectfully requesting a pet contract." A warm feeling came from the battlefield imprint, and some information that he had never seen before was transmitted into his mind. In his consciousness, there seemed to be an ancient beast skin parchment. It didn't take long for him to realize that this was a pet contract. It allowed the cultivator and the pet beast to form an inseparable bond. That way, the pet beast would be able to follow the cultivator into and out of the spirit stream battlefield. For example, Hu Po was a demonic beast born in the spirit stream battlefield. Without this pet contract, it would have been impossible for it to leave the spirit stream battlefield and head to the 9 states. This was a bit mysterious, and it reminded Lu Yi of the Heaven's Secret contract that Li Baxin had requested. Whether it was a Heaven's Secret contract or a pet contract, they couldn't have appeared out of nowhere. Where did these things come from? Why did he only need to respectfully request a Heaven's Secret contract to come out? And what was Heaven's Secret? Some questions arose in Lu Yi's mind, but he didn't delve too deeply into it. He felt that these things definitely contained a great secret, but it was still too far away from him. There was a price to pay for a pet contract, and the price was 100 merit points. The information Lu Yi had just received explained this point. He checked the information in his battlefield imprint. Name, Lu Yi. Identity, Jade Blood Sect's Disciple Cultivation, 64 Apertures. Location, Spirit Stream Battlefield. Merit points, 943. There wasn't much change in his cultivation. During the battle to kill Dong Shai, he had already opened 63 apertures. After so many days, he had only opened one more aperture. The main reason was that he had been running and killing enemies all this time, so he didn't have any extra spiritual power to open his apertures. His merit points had changed a lot though. He remembered that after killing Dong Shai, he had less than 400 merit points, but now he had almost 1,000. Naturally, the majority of his merit points came from the battle on Golden Light Peak. While on Golden Light Peak, Lu Yi had fought 43 battles in a row and killed at least 30 enemies. Except for the first one he killed, which was a 5th order, the rest were all 6th order, each of which gave him 12 merit points. The final battle had even given him 21 merit points. On Golden Light Peak alone, Lu Yi had obtained almost 360 to 70 merit points, with the rest coming from killing enemies along the way. 100 merit points wasn't a small number. Although Lu Ye's merit points were close to 1,000 now, it wasn't easy to obtain them. These merit points represented his battle record along the way. However, Yi and Hoopa had known each other for a long time and had accompanied him all this time. Lu Yi had been able to escape death many times thanks to Hoopo's speed, so no matter what, he had to request a pet contract. Not to mention 100 merit points, even if it cost him all his merit points, Lu Yi wouldn't frown. With a single thought, a milky white vortex appeared in front of the Heaven's Fate pillar and slowly rotated. At the same time, Lu Ye's merit points decreased by 100. Reaching into the vortex, Lu Yi took out a simple animal skin parchment. According to the information he had obtained before, Lu Yi bit his fingertip and pressed his fingertip onto the animal skin parchment, pushing his spirit chi and sending it towards the confused Hoopa. The animal skin parchment burst into flames and shot towards Hoopa, merging into his body. Although Hoopa didn't understand what was happening, he didn't move because the flames didn't cause him any harm. A moment later, the flames went out and Lu Yi clearly felt that there was an additional layer of connection between him and Hoopa. This connection not only allowed them to perceive each other even if they were not too far apart, Lu Yi also seemed to be able to perceive Hoopa's thoughts more clearly. This pet contract was a bit mysterious. Without delay, Lu Yi took Hoopa back to Blue Blood Sect's headquarters. After he left, several heads peeked out from the entrance of Heaven's Fate Hall and saw that there was no one inside. Only then did they confirm that Blue Blood Sect's Lu Yi had come to station. The news quickly spread, and many itinerant cultivators became worried. Inside the sect's Heaven's Fate Hall, 2nd senior sister and 4th senior brother were still waiting. Seeing Lu Yi and Hooper appear together, Li Baxian smiled and said, "Did you see Xiao Hui?" "Xiao Hui?" Lu Yi was stunned but quickly reacted. Li Baxian was talking about the giant gray eagle and his eyes couldn't help but twitch. Who named it? Such a handsome and majestic beast was actually given such a casual name. That's the pet beast that eldest senior brother tamed back then. Li Baxian explained with a smile. After eldest senior brother left the Spirit Stream battlefield, it stayed in the station. That's why 2nd senior sister told you not to worry about it. Blue Blood Sect's station doesn't have anything good right now, and with Xiao Hui guarding it, the sects in the outer circle won't dare to offend us. As he spoke, he tossed a jade slip to Lu Yi. "I've written down the general situation of the station in here. Take a look at it when you have time. As a guardian envoy, cultivating in the station is still very beneficial, especially since your cultivation is still low." Lu Yi took the jade slip and nodded slightly. Suddenly, he remembered something and patted Hoopo's head. "Come out and greet my 2nd senior sister and 4th senior brother." Shui Yuan and Li Baxian looked at Hoopo in confusion, not knowing how he should greet them. But soon, their expressions turned to surprise. Yi Yi's figure slowly floated out, a little shy as she whispered, "Greetings, 2nd senior sister, 4th senior brother." She didn't know how to address Shui Yuan and Li Baxian, so she just followed Lu Ye's lead. During the Battle of Golden Light Peak, Yi hadn't shown herself, mainly because there was no point in showing herself. Moreover, she was a spirit body, so it wasn't convenient for her to show herself to others. But here, it didn't matter. Whether it was her 2nd senior sister or 4th senior brother, they were all on the same side. Li Baxian stared at her for a while before looking at Lu Yi. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Not bad, little junior brother." He had an expression that said all men understood. Lu Yi explained, "Yi is Hoopo's companion spirit. Along the way, she and Hoopa have helped me a lot." "Spirit body?" Shui Yuan was curious. Even with her experience, she had never seen an existence like Yi. She curiously stepped forward and raised her hand to pinch Yi's arm. To her surprise, she found that it wasn't any different from pinching a solid body. However, she could see that Yi was indeed a spirit body, but she could transform between an illusory and solid body. Shui Yuan and Li Baxian's scrutiny made Yi feel uneasy, and she looked over for help. Shui Yuan patted her head. Since your little junior brother's companion, you're a member of Blue Blood sect. From now on, treat this place as your home. Her words seemed to have a great soothing effect. Yi stared at her, her eyes slowly turning red before she fiercely nodded. From now on, I also have a home. Thinking back to her decision to leave Blue Cloud Mountain with Lu Yi, Yi was filled with joy. Li Baxian winked at Lu Yi before walking out. Lu Yi stepped forward and followed. Walking out of Sky's secret hall, Li Baxian said, originally, after you entered the sect, you would have arranged for an instructor to teach you cultivation, especially now that you're a fifth-order cultivator. You should have seen the state of Blue Blood sect, so I'm afraid no one will be able to teach you anything. Although the old man is strong, he hasn't taught anyone for many years, and he's quite rigid, so he's not suitable for this kind of thing. Suddenly, a stone flew out of nowhere and smashed into Li Baxian's head with lightning speed. A visible bump appeared on Li Baxian's head, but he acted as if nothing had happened. He turned around and looked at Lu Yi with the bump on his head. It's a good thing that you've been cultivating well. However, the most important thing now is to determine your own faction. Have you thought about it carefully? A weapon cultivator. Lu Yi stared at Li Baxian's head and gave a decisive answer. Chapter 174. Along the way, he had slashed his way through. His fighting style was enough to determine his future faction. Li Baxian nodded. Weapon cultivators are a very large faction, among which sword cultivators are the most respected. There is a saying that the sword is the king of weapons, and sword cultivators are the strongest among weapon cultivators. Since you want to become a weapon cultivator, do you want to cultivate the sword? I'm a saber user, senior brother. I know, but I've seen your saber before. It's similar to a sword. If you want to cultivate the sword, I can teach you so you won't have to take many detours. Lu Yi thought seriously for a moment before slowly shaking his head. I'm not compatible with swords. I used a sword at first, but it just didn't feel right. Li Baxian earnestly advised, this kind of thing can be slowly worn in, you'll get used to it. Lu Yi insisted, no need, fourth senior brother, I'm still used to using sabers. The corner of Li Baxian's eyes twitched. His persuasion had failed. He sighed and said, since that's the case, go and prepare a suitable weapon. Starting tomorrow, I will teach you some things, some very practical things. The corners of his mouth slowly curled up, and Lu Yi suddenly had a bad feeling. His saber had been completely shattered on the golden light. Fortunately, it was only a low-grade spirit artifact, so it wasn't too distressing to break. Now, it was not easy to find a suitable weapon. Previously, he had killed many people on the Golden Light Peak and seized many storage bags. At first, he would collect those storage bags himself, and no one from the Myriad Demon's Ridge would stop him. Later, when first senior sister saw that he was too tired, she would help him clean up after every battle, and no one dared to stop her. A few days ago, second senior sister gave him his spoils of war. The restrictions on those storage bags had been opened, but those guys didn't have many good things. What Lu Yi obtained the most were spirit stones, spirit pills, and spirit talismans. As if seeing Lu Ye's troubles, Li Baxian said, go take a look at the jade slip I gave you, you'll understand what to do. Lu Yi returned to his residence, took out the jade slip, and carefully examined it. There were many things recorded in the jade slip, and it was most suitable for someone like Lu Yi who knew little about the cultivation world. Presumably, fourth senior brother had already considered this. The more Lu Yi examined it, the more he felt the mysteries of the so-called heaven secret. It could be said that although he had spent half a year on the Spirit Stream battlefield, his understanding of this world was only the tip of the iceberg. 2 hours later, he put down the jade slip and slowly digested the information in his mind. After a long time, he entered Heaven's Pillar and entered the Spirit Heaven's battlefield. Heaven's Palace. Heavens, 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 origin, Louis to heavens, 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 soul. As soon as the words left his mouth, a vortex appeared in front of him. An irresistible force emerged from the vortex, and before Lu Yi could react, he was sucked in. When he came back to his senses, he was already standing in an incomparably spacious hall. Rows of weapon racks were placed in the hall, and he couldn't see the end of them at a glance. No matter what kind of weapon it was, there was everything here, and every single one of them was a spirit weapon. This was Lu Ye's first time experiencing something like this, and it was a bit of a novelty. Silently sensing his surroundings, he found that his body was still in Heaven's secret hall, but his consciousness had entered this place. The Heaven's secret treasury was a mysterious place that Fourth Senior Brother had mentioned in the Jade Slip. In the 9 provinces, in the Spirit Stream battlefield, any cultivator with enough merit points could make a deal with the Heaven's secret treasury. Li Baxian's Heaven's secret treasury contract was a deal, and Lu Ye's pet contract was also a deal. Therefore, if one wanted to buy something, making a deal with the Heaven's secret treasury was the most convenient, because it had everything. The only downside was that one could only use merit points to make a deal with the Heaven's secret treasury. This was different from the Heaven's Secret Merchant Alliance. The Heaven's Secret Merchant Alliance could use spirit stones, but relatively speaking, making a deal with the Heaven's secret treasury was the fastest. As long as one had enough merit points, they could buy any unowned treasure in the world. If Lu Yi wanted to find a suitable saber in a short amount of time, coming here to make a deal with the Heaven's secret treasury was undoubtedly the best choice. No one knew what the Heaven's secret treasury was, just like how the cultivators of the 9 provinces had never been able to find the exact location of the Spirit Stream battlefield. Therefore, even if someone wanted to take the treasures in the Heaven's secret treasury, they couldn't do it. Based on what was known today, the Heaven's Secret Merchant Alliance had some connection with the Heaven's secret treasury. This was because some people had discovered that some of the treasures in the Heaven's secret treasury would be sold by the Heaven's Secret Merchant Alliance, and the things the Heaven's Secret Merchant Alliance bought would also appear in the Heaven's secret treasury. Lu Yi had only come here to find a saber, so he couldn't be bothered to find out more about these secrets. However, looking at the endless shelves of weapons, he felt a headache coming on. Sometimes, when there were too many things, it would be hard to choose. Therefore, he said, "Saber." The scenery around him distorted slightly, and the entire treasury suddenly shrank. Although it still looked very big, at least he could see the end. The spiritual weapons on the shelves were all in the style of long sabers, just as Lu Yi had requested. There were many sabers that were similar to the one he had before. He casually picked one up and used his spirit power to examine it. He found that it wasn't much better than the one he had before, so he casually put it down and picked up another one to examine it. It was the same. He thought for a moment, then said, 9 restrictions? Then he added, focus on strengthening the blade. The quality of a spirit artifact depended on the material used to forge it as well as the number of restrictions placed on it. 9 restrictions was the limit of a low-rank spirit artifact. Anything with more than 9 restrictions was a mid-rank spirit artifact. This was the information his 4th senior brother had told him in the Jade Slip. A spirit artifact's quality wasn't necessarily higher, it also depended on who was using it. Restrictions required spirit chi to activate, and the more restrictions there were, the greater the consumption. If one's cultivation was too low, even if they held a high-rank spirit artifact, they wouldn't be able to activate the restrictions on it. With Lu Ye's current 5th order cultivation, a 9-restriction low-rank spirit artifact would be enough for him to use for a long time. As for strengthening the blade, it was naturally because Yang Kai didn't need the spirit artifact to be sharp. The sharpness spirit inscriptions could solve this problem. The Heaven's secret treasury changed again, and the number of spirit artifacts that appeared this time decreased significantly, leaving only a dozen or so rows. Lu Yi walked around and inspected them one by one. Very soon he found a suitable saber among them. This spirit artifact saber was similar to the one he had used before, but it was much heavier. However, to Lu Yi, it was undoubtedly more convenient because his current strength was much greater than when he had left Azure Cloud Mountain. Inspecting the interior of the long saber, Yang Kai found 9 spirit inscriptions that were connected to each other through a mysterious method. 7 of the 9 spirit inscriptions were used to strengthen the blade, while 2 were used to enhance the spirit artifact's lethality. These 2 spirit inscriptions were very similar to his sharpness spirit inscriptions. Can spirit inscriptions be connected like this? Lu Yi was puzzled. In the end, his understanding of spirit inscriptions was limited to those he obtained from the talent tree. He could activate the 3 spirit inscriptions at will, but he knew nothing about the other spirit inscriptions. Suppressing his desire to explore further, Lu Yi was undoubtedly very satisfied with this long saber. Perhaps for other cultivators, this spirit artifact's lethality wasn't strong enough, but for Lu Yi, this wasn't a problem. With the enhancement of his sharpness spirit inscriptions, he could cut through anything. The price was also marked. On the body of the long saber, there were a few numbers that emitted a faint glow. 138. In other words, if Lu Yi chose to take this long saber out of the Tianji treasury, he would lose 138 merit points. He didn't know if this price was expensive or cheap, but compared to the price of a pet contract, it definitely wasn't cheap. Lu Yi didn't continue looking. The difference between low-grade spirit artifacts wasn't that great. It was already good enough that he could find such a long saber. With a thought, the surrounding scenery suddenly collapsed. When he came back to his senses, he was already standing in the Tianji Hall. His mind felt a little tired. This was the price to pay to communicate with the Tianji treasury. It could be said that the longer one stayed in the Tianji treasury, the more tired one's mind would be. He originally wanted to look for something in the Tianji treasury, but now he could only give up on that. Looking down, he held the long saber that cost 138 merit points in his hand. Lu Yi unsheathed the saber. The saber light didn't give off a feeling of sharpness. Instead, it felt very heavy. Only then did he notice that there were 2 small characters on the saber's hilt. Carefully looking at it, he recognized that it was Mount Pan. In other words, this saber had a name, but he didn't know who made it. He casually swung it a few times and found that it didn't feel any different from when he was testing it in the Tianji treasury. In fact, it was even more convenient. Sheathing the saber, he stepped out of the Tianji Hall. According to the instructions in the 4th Senior Brother's Jade Slip, he had to go to another place in the encampment. Not long after he left, a young cultivator hurriedly ran over. He tidied up his appearance outside the Tianji Hall and stepped in. Looking around, he couldn't see Lu Ye's shadow. For a moment, he was confused. He turned around and looked at the other cultivator who followed him. "Didn't you say that Lu Yi came?" "I saw him here just now." The cultivator who followed him explained. "He went back again?" The young man was a little annoyed. When he received the news that Lu Yi had appeared again, he hurriedly rushed over. Who knew that he would still be a step too late? Thinking about it, he ordered the person who followed him, "You stay here and keep watch. When he comes again, notify me immediately. If possible, ask him to wait for me here for a while." That person agreed without hesitation. At this moment, Lu Yi had arrived at another place. This was a building complex made up of small rooms. These were the cultivation rooms of the Blue Blood sect's disciples. Disciples who had nothing to do could enter secluded cultivation here. Every sect had such a place in a secluded place. It wasn't unique to the Blue Blood sect. However, because the Blue Blood sect hadn't accepted disciples for several decades, this place was overgrown with weeds and was barren. Chapter 175. After spending some time cleaning up the weeds near the cultivation room, Lu Yi found a cultivation room that looked pleasing to the eye and pushed the door open. Although this place was desolate and unattended, it was a place that the Jade Blood sect had spent a lot of money to build. After all, it was related to the cultivation of the disciples and could not be careless. Therefore, every cultivation room here was covered by a spirit array. Only the disciples of the Jade Blood sect could enter. However, because no one had used it for a long time, the spirit array here had stopped operating long ago. Looking up, the room was not big and there were no extra decorations. There was only a trace of a spirit array on the ground. It was a spirit gathering array that could gather world energy from all directions and increase the efficiency of cultivation. Not only that, there were 8 grooves around the spirit gathering array. If spirit stones were placed in the grooves, it could increase the density of world energy in the room. The world energy in every sex station was denser than in the wild. Take the jade blood sex station for example. The world energy here was about 10% denser than in the wild. It was not much because this was only the most basic increase. As long as the Tianji pillar was still functioning, the area covered by the Tianji pillar would receive this kind of increase. This was also the reason why rogue cultivators gathered in the jade blood sex station. The world energy here was denser. However, if the sect was destroyed, the ownerless Tianji pillars would no longer have this effect. For example, the Ying mountain where Lu Yi had once stayed also had a Tianji pillar, but the world energy there was no different than in the wild. A 10% increase was only the most basic. If one had enough merit points, they could buy a buff from the Tianji pillar. It was the power of the Tianji pillar that could make the world energy in the station even denser. For example, the top forces in the core circle had world energy several times or even more than 10 times that in the wild. Cultivating in such an environment was undoubtedly much more efficient. The jade blood sex Tianji pillar did not have any buffs and only had the most basic function. Fortunately, there was the spirit gathering array in the cultivation room. This was also why second senior sister said that it would be better to cultivate in the station. The spirit gathering array under Lu Ye's feet did not operate because it had already lost its energy supply. He was not in a hurry to activate the spirit gathering array. Instead, he examined the patterns of the spirit gathering array. An hour later, he came to a conclusion. The runic patterns of the spirit gathering array were 80% similar to his spirit gathering rune. Both of them could be said to have originated from the same source. It could even be said that his spirit gathering rune was a miniature spirit gathering array. Lu Yi took out 8 spirit stones and placed them in the 8 grooves of the spirit gathering formation. Then he walked to the center of the formation and pressed his hand down, activating his spiritual energy. As his spiritual energy continued to be consumed, the array formation in the room began to operate. Lu Yi could clearly feel the surrounding spiritual energy rushing over. In a short period of time, the spirit chi in the room became denser than outside. This was not only because the spirit gathering array was gathering the spirit chi of heaven and earth, but also because the spirit chi in the 8 grooves had been stimulated. However, there was a limit to this kind of increase. Lu Yi felt that the spirit chi in the room had increased by about 20% and stopped increasing. Even if the spirit gathering array gathered more spirit chi, it would dissipate if it was not absorbed. Lu Yi thought for a moment, then raised his hand and pressed it against a wall. Following the crazy consumption of his spiritual energy, a huge spirit gathering rune was constructed. The spirit chi of heaven and earth surged even more intensely. Previously, when he obtained the spirit gathering rune, he had considered this point. If the spirit gathering rune was large enough, then it should have a very obvious effect. Now, he had finally verified it. Moreover, because the spirit gathering rune would constantly absorb spirit chi of heaven and earth to replenish itself, as long as it was not deliberately destroyed, it could continue like this. It was different from the spirit gathering array. The spirit gathering array relied on the power of spirit stones to operate. While consuming the spirit stones, it also stimulated the spirit chi within the spirit stones. The stimulated spirit chi would be absorbed by the cultivator. Sensing his own body, he found that he had consumed a lot of spiritual energy. After all, he had never constructed such a huge spirit gathering array before. However, he could still construct another one. Soon, the second spirit gathering rune appeared on the wall on the floor. Lu Yi immediately felt as if his entire body had been hollowed out. However, the price was worth it. The spirit chi of heaven and earth surged even more intensely. Now, in this small cultivation room, there was a spirit gathering array in effect, as well as 2 spirit gathering runes. Lu Yi really wanted to know what kind of effect cultivating in this environment would have. He took out a praying mat from his storage bag and threw it on the floor. Sitting cross-legged, he began to construct small funnels in his spiritual cavities. After an incense stick's worth of time, all 64 spiritual cavities had been reinforced with spirit gathering runes. In a split second, Lu Yi felt the surrounding spirit chi crazily rush into his body. Through the operation of his cultivation method, it was transformed into his own spirit chi. His body, which had consumed a lot of energy, quickly began to recover. 6 hours later, Lu Yi stood up again and constructed another large-scale spirit-gathering rune on the third wall of the cultivation room. The spirit-gathering rune's effect had increased once again. He sensed the changes in his spirit chi. In the end, he came to a shocking conclusion. Cultivating in this environment, a day and night's improvement was almost equivalent to refining 5 spirit pills. He had discovered the miraculous effect of the spirit-gathering rune on his 29th aperture. At that time, he had made an experiment and reinforced his 29th aperture with spirit-gathering runes. In the end, he had come to the conclusion that cultivating for a day and night was almost equivalent to refining a spirit accumulation pill. Now, he had opened 64 apertures, more than twice as many as when he opened 29 apertures. Moreover, the cultivation environment had greatly changed, which greatly improved the effect of his cultivation. After reaching the 5th order spirit stream realm, he needed to consume more than 20 spirit pills for every aperture he opened. In other words, even if he didn't take any spirit pills and cultivated in this environment, it would only take him 4 or 5 days to open one aperture. If he could take spirit pills, the efficiency would be even faster. Right now, the world energy in the blue blood sex station was only 10% richer than in the wild, and the Heaven's Fate Pillar didn't have the slightest support. What if he could strengthen the Heaven's Fate Pillar and make the station's world energy 2 times, or even 5 times, 10 times richer than in the wild? Just thinking about it made Lu Yi fascinated. He had to find a way to restore his talent tree's ability to burn pill toxins, and find a way to strengthen the Heaven's Fate Pillar. He planned to go to the Heaven's Fate Treasure House to look for the former. As for the latter, he had no clue. He would have to ask his 4th senior brother about it, but the jade slip his 4th senior brother gave him didn't mention it. His consumed spirit chi had been completely restored, and Lu Yi was now trying to open the 65th aperture. But before he could open the 65th aperture barrier, a message came from the battlefield mark. Looking down, he saw that it was from his 2nd senior sister. Your 4th senior brother is looking for you. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible to communicate with each other in the spirit stream battlefield in the 9 continents because the two were not in the same space, but Lu Yi was the guardian of the blue blood sect, and his 2nd senior sister was the guardian of the blue blood sect, so they could communicate with each other. Only then did Lu Yi remember that he had been so immersed in his cultivation that he had forgotten his agreement with his 4th senior brother. He didn't know what his 4th senior brother wanted to teach him. After sending a message back, Lu Yi ended his cultivation. The 8 spirit stones were almost used up, but Lu Yi didn't care. He pushed open the door and walked out, closing it behind him. Then he used his authority as a guardian to activate the nearby spirit array. This place would be his exclusive cultivation place in the future, and no one could enter at will. Walking over to Heaven's secret hall, Lu Yi saw a man sitting at the entrance, meditating and looking bored. The sound of footsteps alerted this person, and he quickly opened his eyes. Seeing Lu Yi, he was overjoyed. Are you Lu Yi of the Blue Blood Sect, fellow cultivator Lu? Indeed, Lu Yi responded. Looking at the other party and seeing that he was a 3rd order cultivator, he frowned. What's the matter? The man quickly replied. Senior brother Chinyu is looking for fellow cultivator Lu. He wants to discuss the market with you. Market? Lu Yi was puzzled. Why would he want to discuss the market with him? However, he quickly reacted. The market here had been maintained for many years and a large number of rogue cultivators had gathered here. Only the Heavenly Secret Commerce Union had stayed here. But after he arrived, the situation of the rogue cultivators became a little awkward. They were reluctant to leave, but it was inappropriate for them to stay. After all, this was the blue blood sect's territory. No one cared about them before, but now they did. Fellow cultivator Lu, please wait a moment. I will ask senior brother Chen to come over, the man said and was about to send a message. I still have something to do. Let's talk later. Lu Yi was in a hurry to return to the sect, so he didn't have the leisure to wait here. Moreover, he didn't know how to deal with this kind of matter, so it was best to ask his senior brothers and senior sisters. When will fellow cultivator Lu come again? I will ask senior brother Chen to wait here, the man asked dutifully. Tomorrow. After Lu Yi replied, he returned to the sect with the help of the heavenly secret pillar. Walking out of the heavenly secret hall, Lu Yi followed the fragrance to the dining room. The table was already filled with delicious food, and just smelling it was enough to make one's mouth water. These delicacies weren't just for filling the stomach. These were medicinal cuisines specially cooked by his second senior sister, and each dish had a special effect. Lu Yi was surprised to find that today's dishes were extraordinarily numerous. Li Baxian had already sat down, eating and drinking. Seeing Lu Yi return, he greeted him warmly. "Little junior brother, sit down and try the fish I caught." Lu Yi sat down, picked up a fish with his chopsticks, and took a bite. It was unexpectedly delicious. Li Baxian said with a smile, "The blood-red trout of the moon lake used to temper the bodies of the disciples. Every disciple was given a certain amount, but now, you can eat as much as you want. Let me tell you, if you need spirit stones one day, go to the moon lake and catch a few. It won't be a problem to sell each one for a few hundred spirit stones." Cough, cough, cough. Lu Yi coughed violently. He didn't expect this thing to be so expensive. Also, this is Little Gray's favorite food. When you go back to the base, bring 2 for him. He has been neglected for so many years, so he's quite pitiful. Got it. Lu Yi nodded. "Little junior brother, do you drink?" Before Li Baxian finished speaking, he felt a pair of sharp eyes looking at him. He hurriedly changed his words. "You're still young, so don't drink. You have to be careful when you go out. Don't let those loose women force you to drink and trick you into various positions." Louis. Chapter 176. On the square in the front hall of Zhengshou Peak, Lu Yi held the hilt of his saber under the blood-colored golden flame flag as he stared forward with a solemn expression. Opposite him, Li Baxian casually held a sword in his hand as he smiled and said, "In half a year, you've reached the 5th order. Your strength has increased too quickly. In fact, sometimes it's not necessarily a good thing to increase one's cultivation too quickly, because others have more time to polish their battle skills while you don't. Especially for an armament cultivator, battle skills are very important. Under the golden light, you have more than enough courage to fight the enemy, but your lack of skill is your biggest shortcoming." In half a year, he had grown from a little cultivator who had just opened his apertures to the 5th order realm and had even mastered a defensive spirit rune. This matter had long since spread and was no longer a secret. Lu Yi originally thought that the temple master would ask about this matter, and he had already thought about it. If the temple master asked, he would tell him the truth. But in fact, since he woke up, the temple master had not asked about this matter at all. He had only told Lu Yi a few days ago when everyone was lying in bed and recuperating. Now, many people knew that he had obtained some fortuitous encounters in the spirit stream battlefield, so perhaps some people would have ideas about this, so he should be more vigilant. Of course, the possibility of such a thing happening was not high, because the temple master had said that there were many fortuitous encounters in the spirit stream battlefield. Lu Ye's growth to the 5th order in half a year seemed fast, but there had been even faster in history. There was once a mortal who had obtained a fortuitous encounter in the spirit stream battlefield and reached the 9th order in just a year. The spirit stream battlefield had many mysterious places that contained all kinds of mysteries. It was difficult for ordinary people to see them, but those who were fated could easily obtain them. Almost every few years, someone would obtain a fortuitous encounter. The cultivation world had become accustomed to this kind of thing, and most people just envied others' good luck. For those who really pursued something, it was better to work hard than to envy others' good luck. The old man is a Dharma cultivator and second senior sister is a medical cultivator. They are too strong and haven't taught anyone for many years, so they won't be able to teach you anything. As your 4th senior brother, I will teach you well." Li Baxian laughed heartily. For him, teaching Lu Yi seemed to be a great job. "You're a 5th order cultivator, so I'll suppress my cultivation to the 5th order. I won't take advantage of you, use all your skills to attack." As he spoke, he took a sip from the wine gourd in his hand. However, the moment he lifted the wine gourd, Lu Yi rushed towards him. Halfway through, he unsheathed his saber and slashed horizontally. "You know how to sneak attack. Very good." Li Baxian didn't move his feet. Instead, he leaned back slightly. The Pan Shan saber brushed past his neck but didn't hurt him in the slightest. He even had the leisure to comment on Lu Ye's saber. When facing an enemy, you must maintain this kind of indomitable momentum. However, it's not a good thing if you use too much strength. It's easy to be caught by others. The blade in Lu Ye's hand slashed down diagonally, but Li Baxian dodged it again. He didn't even move his feet as he continued. Insufficient adaptability, slow to change moves. On the square, Lu Yi continuously attacked with his saber. Li Baxian dodged while jabbering on, causing Lu Ye's head to be filled with anger and his attacks to become even more ferocious. However, he helplessly discovered that the gap between him and his fourth senior brother was too big. Although his fourth senior brother had suppressed his cultivation to the fifth order, Lu Yi couldn't even touch a corner of his robes. Every time Lu Yi slashed out, fourth senior brother was able to dodge as if he could predict the future. Moreover, up until now, his fourth senior brother hadn't even used his sword. Instead, he simply held the long sword in his hand and took a few sips of wine while speaking. Only now did Lu Yi realize how terrifying his fourth senior brother was. If a character like his fourth senior brother had appeared on the golden platform, he would have been beaten to a pulp. After taking another sip of wine, Li Baxian's aura suddenly changed. He raised the long sword in his hand and casually resolved Lu Ye's attacks, leisurely saying, "Little junior brother, be careful, I'm about to attack." In the next moment, a series of clanging sounds rang out, causing Lu Ye's expression to become solemn. His fourth senior brother's sword didn't have much strength, nor was it fast, but the timing of each strike was just right, making it difficult for Lu Yi to form a slash. A moment later, Lu Yi felt like he was a puppet being manipulated, only able to passively defend against his fourth senior brother's attacks. Li Baxian stepped forward step by step, while Lu Yi retreated step by step. When their swords collided, Li Baxian said, "In a battle between armament cultivators, you must control your own rhythm and make your opponent follow your rhythm. Once you do this, you can lead your opponent by the nose, just like this." As soon as his voice fell, he swung his long sword, causing Lu Ye's body to suddenly lean back, leaving his chest wide open as a sword light pierced straight towards him. When Lu Yi saw this sword, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. With a thought, a defensive spirit rune appeared on his chest. However, in the next moment he froze. Looking down, he saw that his fourth senior brother's sword had pierced his chest, only an inch away from his heart. His defensive spirit rune actually didn't have time to block this sword. And, was fourth senior brother for real? Lu Yi looked up and saw Li Baxian's eyes drooping. "Little junior brother, you're dead." He suddenly pulled out his sword, causing blood to spurt out as Lu Yi staggered back. Not far away, Thi, who was watching the battle in high spirits, suddenly exclaimed. She got up and was about to run towards Lu Yi. A hand pressed down on her shoulder. Yi turned her head and saw Shui Yuan shaking her head at her. In the future, when he walks on the battlefield and in the 9 provinces, the enemies he encounters won't show mercy to him. Now that he's suffering here, he'll suffer less in the future. Although Yi was worried, she knew that her second senior sister would never harm Lu Yi, so she endured it and continued to watch. At the same time, she also understood why her second senior sister had prepared a large basin of medicinal liquid before the battle. Again, Lu Yi took a deep breath. Although his chest was almost pierced through, his fourth senior brother's attack was measured and didn't hurt his vital parts. He raised the long sword in his hand and charged towards Li Baxian again. A moment later, blood splashed as Li Baxian's faint voice sounded, "Little junior brother, you've died again." A moment later, "Little junior brother, you've died 3 times." An hour later, Lu Yi was lying on the ground with a pale face, his body covered in wounds. Although they weren't serious, he had lost a lot of blood and was unable to fight again. In just a short hour, he had been killed by his fourth senior brother over 100 times, and this was under the premise that his fourth senior brother had held back. The sun was so bright that Lu Yi found it difficult to open his eyes. A shadow covered his eyes as Li Baxian squatted down in front of him and smiled. "How do you feel?" Lu Yi didn't know how to answer. How could this feeling be described as terrible? He couldn't help asking, "Fourth senior brother, has our blue blood sect always trained its disciples like this before?" If this was really the case, then it would be a waste of disciples. How is that possible? Li Baxian chuckled. You're all alone now, so we can only take care of you. You don't need to worry, the medicinal cuisine you ate before has the effect of replenishing your vitality, so you'll be fine after a night of rest. Lu Yi now understood why there had been such a large table of good food before. Then fourth senior brother, have you ever taught others before? So you don't know how to teach others either. Because he didn't know how to teach others, he could only rely on Lu Ye's own injuries to remember each fatal crisis, and this kind of physical memory was undoubtedly the most unforgettable. Li Baxian patted him on the shoulder and said sincerely, let's be considerate of each other. Also, this was second senior sister's idea, it had nothing to do with me. Before he could finish speaking, second senior sister grabbed him by the scruff of his neck and lifted him off to the side. Immediately after, Shui Yuan helped Lu Yi up and led him to a nearby room where a medicinal liquid had been prepared. After being treated by second senior sister, Lu Yi was full of energy again. Her skin and flesh wounds healed quickly. The medicinal liquid concocted by second senior sister was extraordinarily effective. Coupled with the fact that she was a medical cultivator herself, Lu Yi got up in the evening with her whole body drenched. His wounds had not completely healed yet, but he should be fine after another night. Moreover, the old and new scars all over Lu Ye's body had disappeared. This was second senior sister's miraculous method. In the evening, after eating another table of medicinal cuisine, Lu Yi entered the spirit stream battlefield using the Heaven's Fate pillar. He planned to cultivate on the battlefield at night as this was the most efficient place to cultivate. As soon as he appeared in Heaven's Fate Hall, he felt the aura of strangers outside. Lu Yi turned his head and saw two heads looking in his direction. One of them was the one he met yesterday, while the other was a stranger, but judging from his aura, he was a seventh-order cultivator. Lu Yi thought about it for a moment before stepping out. The seventh-order cultivator greeted him enthusiastically and cupped his fists. Are you fellow Taoist Lu Yi from Blue Blood Sect? This one is Qinyu. Lu Yi nodded and threw a contract to Qinyu. If there are no problems, sign it. HM? Qinyu looked confused as he took the contract and read it carefully. When he returned during the day, Lu Yi asked second senior sister and fourth senior brother about how to deal with the rogue cultivators in the station and also learned about the general situation here from second senior sister. Although second senior sister could not enter and leave the spirit stream battlefield at will, there were a few rogue cultivators she trusted here. Second senior sister had asked them to inquire about Lu Ye's whereabouts, but their cultivations were not high, so before news of Lu Yi spread, they did not manage to find anything useful. By the time they received the news, it was already too late. Through those rogue cultivators, second senior sister had some understanding of the situation in the station. Chen Yu was one of them and was the strongest among the rogue cultivators. After all, this was the outermost area, so a seventh-order cultivator was already very high. Moreover, the market here had always been managed by him, which was why he wanted to talk to Lu Yi. The market in the station was not the same as the ones Lu Yi had passed by before. There was no Heavenly Secret Commerce Union subunion here because this was still Blue Blood Sect's station. Rogue cultivators could come here, but Heavenly Secret Commerce Union could not, otherwise, it would be a provocation to Blue Blood Sect. However, even without a Heavenly Secret Commerce Union subunion, this place was still quite popular because the world energy here was 10% richer than in the wild, which was a great attraction to rogue cultivators. Chapter 177. In the past, there were no Spirit Stream Realm disciples in the Jade Blood Sect, so there was no one to manage the station, allowing rogue cultivators to run over. But now, things were different. The Jade Blood Sect had Lu Yi, and if Lu Yi insisted on driving them away, those rogue cultivators wouldn't be able to stay. After the news of Lu Ye's appearance in the station spread out yesterday, many rogue cultivators felt nervous, fearing that they would be driven away. This was why Qinyu had hurriedly come to find Lu Yi. He hadn't thought that before he had even explained his purpose, Lu Yi would give him a contract. Looking down, Qinyu's expression gradually eased. The contents of the contract were very simple. The situation in the market would remain as it was for the time being, but the Jade Blood sect could let the rogue cultivators leave at any time. At the same time, the Jade Blood sect entrusted Qinyu with managing the market, and if the rogue cultivators wanted to stay in the market, depending on their cultivation, they would have to pay 2 to 5 spirit stones per month to the Jade Blood sect. This was a contract drawn up by Shui Yuan, and the fee was not high. If it was just a few spirit stones, the rogue cultivators could afford it. This would bring a certain amount of income to Lu Yi and also let the rogue cultivators know that this was the Jade Blood sect's station, and if they wanted to stay here, they would have to pay a certain price. Chen Yu quickly finished reading it and happily bit his finger and pressed his fingerprint on the contract. After exchanging their respective brands with Lu Yi, he happily rushed to the market, ready to tell the good news to the rogue cultivators who were waiting for news. Compared to the benefits of the rogue cultivators, Chen Yu's gains were naturally much greater. Although he was the nominal manager of the market before, after all, he had no status, but now it was different. With the Jade Blood sect's entrustment, he had a real identity, and it would be more legitimate for him to manage the market. Lu Yi didn't have to worry about the rogue cultivators for the time being. The station was so big that he couldn't use it all by himself, so instead of offending people now, it was better to keep it as it was. In front of the Tianji pillar, Lu Ye's mind connected to the Tianji treasure house, looking for the treasures he needed. After a cup of tea's time, a palm-sized box appeared in Lu Ye's hand and he hurried to the cultivation room. The spirit qi of heaven and earth in the technique practicing room was obviously denser than in other places, especially in the room he stayed in yesterday. Because of the 3 spirit gathering spirit runes that he had set up, the spirit qi here was much denser than in other places. He opened the door, walked in, and sat down with the box in his hand. Looking at the box in his hand, Lu Yi felt both happy and distressed. He was glad that the Tianji treasury indeed had all sorts of good stuff. As long as it was something he wanted, he could find it inside. What made his heart ache was that this small box had cost him 200 contribution points. It was much more expensive than the mountain plate saber. He gently opened the box, and a ball of flame about the size of a baby's fist immediately appeared in front of his eyes, and a scorching aura spread out. It was a small ball of earth core fire, the cheapest kind of strange fire that Lu Yi found in the Tianji treasure vault. The talent tree's ability to burn the pill poison had to be recovered as soon as possible. This was related to the increase of his cultivation. In the past, Lu Yi had guessed that the talent tree needed to absorb some scorching heat or flame energy in order for the leaves on it to burn, allowing him to obtain more spirit marks. However, this had always been a guess and there was no way to verify it. But after a trip to the Tianji treasury, this conjecture was confirmed, because when he stood in the middle of those treasures and strange flames, the innate skill tree that was dormant in his source spirit aperture clearly became active. However, because those treasures were all in the Tianji treasury, the innate skill tree could not absorb their power. Until now, when Lu Yi opened the box in his hand, a trace of abnormality immediately came from his source spirit aperture. Lu Yi immediately focused his mind, and in the next moment he saw the roots of the talent tree growing out, piercing into the earth core fire inside the box. In the blink of an eye, the scorching heat disappeared, and the earth core fire disappeared. The 4th leaf on the talent tree began to burn. Before leaving Mount Qingyun, the 4th leaf had begun to shine after the battle with the barrier-breaking fruit. But because it did not absorb enough energy, it did not undergo a qualitative change. Today, it finally began to burn. In other words, Lu Yi had one more spirit rune. He suppressed the anticipation and joy in his heart and continued to observe, only to find that it was gone. The 5th leaf did not show any signs of burning, and it did not even shine. Lu Yi frowned. This was somewhat different from what he had expected. But soon he found that the talent tree had recovered its ability to burn pill toxins. As his spirit qi circulated, gray mist was constantly being burned out. The pill toxins in his body had accumulated to a peak after the battle at the Golden Summit, causing his spirit qi to become obscure and dim, which had a great impact on his strength and cultivation. Since the battle at the Golden Summit, Lu Yi did not dare to take spirit pills. Although second senior sister had a method to help him expel the pill toxins in his body, and the effect was not bad, she could not completely remove them. This kind of thing required a long time of recuperation and adjustment. But after the talent tree recovered its ability to burn pill toxins, in just a short time, the spirit chi in Lu Ye's body became pure and flawless again. The hidden danger had finally been resolved. Lu Yi relaxed. Combining all the previous events, his guess was correct. The talent tree could absorb scorching heat or some flame energy, and that energy could burn the leaves of the talent tree, allowing Lu Yi to master spirit grain S one after another. In addition, that energy could also be stored in the talent tree as a type of fuel to burn the pill poison. This time, only one leaf burned. It was probably because the talent tree needed to accumulate fuel, so most of the energy was stored. Only a small part of it was used to burn the fourth leaf. There were many treasures in the Tianji treasury that were suitable for the talent tree to absorb. Just the earth core fire alone was enough, and Lu Yi had only bought one of them. It seemed that he still had to go get merit points. As long as he had enough merit points, the talent tree would be able to play a greater role. Looking at his remaining 500 merit points, Lu Yi sighed slightly. A few days ago, he had almost broken through 1,000 merit points. Merit points were difficult to accumulate, but they were spent as quickly as flowing water. Not in a hurry to cultivate, Lu Yi looked at the fourth burning leaf of the talent tree and took a deep breath. His expression became solemn and his mind was immersed in it. The burning leaf rapidly enlarged in Yang Kai's field of vision, obscuring all his thoughts. His mind was forcibly pried open, as if a red-hot iron had reached in and stirred it. After a long while, Lu Yi finally regained his senses, his body drenched in sweat. He shook his head to dispel the discomfort. Even if he was already a fifth-order cultivator, investigating the spirit patterns on the talent tree was still an extremely unpleasant experience. Fortunately, he did not pass out like the first time. Blood stain. This was the name of the fourth spirit pattern. Investigating its mysteries, Lu Yi soon discovered that although this was an offensive spirit pattern, it did not directly increase one's lethality like the sharpness rune. It had other uses. However, it was undeniable that if this spirit pattern was used well, it was not impossible for the weak to defeat the strong. In fact, it would give him a way to fight a strong enemy. Every spirit pattern on the talent tree had great uses, but if he wanted to obtain these spirit patterns, he would first need to obtain some suitable treasures for the talent tree to absorb energy from. In other words, he would need a lot of merit points. Although he still had more than 500 merit points, Yang Kai was not prepared to buy the earth core fire. He would keep some of his merit points in reserve, who knew when they would come in handy. Getting up, Lu Yi placed spirit stones in the 8 positions of the spirit gathering array. When he reached the last piece, Lu Yi thought for a moment before taking out the blood-red scale he had obtained from the dragon spring and placing it in the groove. The spirit gathering array could stimulate the power in spirit stones, so perhaps it could stimulate the power in this scale. There were a lot of bloodlines on the scale, which Hoopa had absorbed several times before. Every time, it was very addictive. Louis did not dare to imitate Hoopa. After all, a monster beast's body was not something he could compare to. However, if the spirit gathering array could stimulate its power, then it would be a safe way to absorb the power in the scale. Next, Yang Kai began constructing spirit-gathering spirit patterns in his spirit apertures. Once everything was ready, he swallowed the pill and started cultivating. Soon, the room was filled with dense spiritual energy. Within the spiritual energy, there was also some red mist flowing. Each mist was like a dragon swimming in the air. Days passed, and during the day, he would temper his skills under Li Baxian's care and protection. Every day, he would be killed by fourth senior brother many times, and every time, he would be covered in blood and would be dragged by second senior sister to soak in a bath for treatment. At night, he would enter the station and explore the mysteries of the Tianji pillar and his authority as a guardian. Sometimes, he would go to the Tianji treasury to broaden his horizons and cultivate. Li Baxian did not teach him too many fighting skills, nor did he teach him any sword arts or blade arts, because such things were worthless in Li Baxian's eyes, and were only good for looking good. Good blade arts and sword arts were the simplest killing techniques. All he did was let Lu Yi use his body to remember each wound. This kind of teaching method could be called cruel, And only the Blue Blood sect had the qualifications to teach like this. If it were any other sect, who knew how many disciples they would have already been crippled? At the dining table, Lu Yi was eating in large mouthfuls while asking Li Baxian for guidance. Fourth senior brother, how can I quickly obtain a large amount of contribution points? Kill the enemy. Li Baxian replied concisely. I naturally know how to kill the enemy, but didn't you say that it would be unsuitable for me to cause trouble outside? It had only been a month since the battle on Golden Light Peak, and the storm had just subsided, so Li Baxian had warned Lu Yi to be a bit more stable in the near future. Fortunately, Lu Yi had been recuperating during this time and had been running back and forth to the station every day, so there was no chance for him to go out and cause trouble. Besides killing the enemy, the only other option is to sell things to the Tianji treasury. Chapter 178. Not only could the Tianji treasury be bought, but it could also be sold. No matter what it was, as long as it was valuable, it could be sold to the Tianji treasury. However, it wasn't worth it. Lu Yi had tried to sell the mountain plate saber to the Tianji treasury, but it was only worth 50 merit points. It had to be known that he had spent 138 merit points to buy it. The price difference was more than double. The most valuable item he could sell was the scale he had obtained from the dragon spring. He had tried it a few days ago and found that it was worth more than 8,000 merit points. However, Lu Yi would definitely not sell this item. The power contained within it was extremely beneficial to Hu Peran himself. Now, every time he cultivated, he would place this scale armor in a spirit-gathering formation, slowly stimulating the power within it. Over the past few days, Lu Yi could clearly feel his physique strengthening. After swallowing the blood threads a few times, Hoopa became more and more majestic. The barrier-breaking fruit was slightly less valuable than the scale. Each fruit was worth 500 merit points, and it couldn't be sold. It was extremely useful for cultivators, and Lu Yi would have a use for it in the future. Moreover, he had already given the 2 barrier-breaking fruits to his second senior apprentice sister. She wasn't just a medical cultivator, she was also an alchemist. She could supplement the barrier-breaking fruit with other herbs to refine barrier-breaking pills, maximizing their effects. As for the value of the barrier-breaking pill, Lu Yi had once investigated it in the Tianji treasury. Each pill cost 300 to 400 merit points, and a single barrier-breaking fruit could be refined into 4 or 5 barrier-breaking pills in the hands of second senior sister. Is there no other way? Lu Yi continued to ask as he ate the food his second senior apprentice sister gave him. Declare war. Li Baxian smiled. Declare war on the Myriad Devil Ridge faction. Set a large amount of merit points in advance. If you win, the merit points will be yours. Lu Ye's face darkened. He was the only disciple in the Jade Blood sect's encampment. Who could he go to declare war? There were several Myriad Devil Ridge sects nearby, and even if they accepted, he had no hope of winning. Moreover, he didn't have the capital to declare war. If he wanted to win merit points from others, he had to have merit points in the early stages. Why don't you participate in the Battle of Spirit Creek? Li Baxian had just finished speaking when Shui Yuan glared fiercely at him. Little junior brother can't stay in the encampment forever. Senior sister, you and the old man can't always protect him. You can protect him for a while, but can you protect him forever? Blue Blood sect's disciples shouldn't be raised in a greenhouse. The earlier they go out and broaden their horizons, the better it will be for them. Shui Yuan was silent as she picked up more food for Lu Yi. Lu Yi looked around and saw that his second senior sister was silent, so he asked, "What is the Battle of Spirit Creek?" Li Baxian began to explain to him, "In about half a month, the results of the sect's grade assessment will be out. Normally, after each grade assessment, there will be this Battle of Spirit Creek." Through Li Baxian's explanation, Lu Yi slowly understood what the Battle of Spirit Creek was. According to the rules of previous years, before the sect's grade assessment, all the sects would remain calm, because if they made any inappropriate moves at this time, it was possible that their sect's grade would fall. This was a responsibility that no one could bear. However, it was impossible for the Spirit Creek battlefield to remain so peaceful. The two camps were destined to oppose each other, so every time the sect's grade assessment was over, it would become extremely lively. The Battle of Spirit Creek was born out of the blue. This was the operation of Heaven's Secret, and no one could resist it. Heaven's Secret seemed to be using this method to intensify the confrontation between the two camps. After the sect's grade assessment, the guardian envoys of the various sects' encampments would be able to sign up and participate in the battle. With the support of their sect's Heaven's Secret pillar as a bargaining chip, they would be able to enter an unknown small space to participate in the battle. If they were killed, the support would be taken away by the killer. The support of the Heaven's Secret pillar was able to make the world energy aura in the encampment much richer, with each support increasing it by 10%. Lu Yi had tried to purchase it with merit points before. The first support cost 500 merit points, which was not a lot. However, after asking Li Baxian, this kind of support would become more expensive as it progressed. Therefore, the strong could obtain a large amount of support in the Battle of Spirit Creek, and if they brought it back to their sect's encampment, it would greatly increase the world energy aura in the encampment. Not only that, there were also many strange treasures in the unknown small space, such as the barrier-breaking fruit, which was extremely rare in the outside world, could be found there. It could be said that the Battle of Spirit Creek, which was held once every 3 years, was a grand event for all the sects of the 9 prefectures. Basically, all the sects in the 9 prefectures would participate. After hearing this, Lu Yi couldn't help but be fascinated. He had been thinking about how to increase the world energy aura in the encampment. If it weren't for the fact that it would cost too many merit points, he would have already bought a support. He had never thought that there would be such a method. However, since it was the Battle of Spirit Creek, naturally only the Guardian Envoys and Vice Guardian Envoys could participate. Each sect could only send 2 representatives. One had to know that there were many sects in the 9 prefectures, so if each sect sent 2 representatives, the number of people participating would be extremely large. But 4th Senior Brother, I'm only a 5th Order, at most I can kill 7th Order Masters. If I encounter the Guardian Envoys of the Core Circle sects, how could I possibly be their opponent? Lu Yi slowly shook his head. Although he was very interested in this Battle of Spirit Creek, he still had some self-awareness. 4th Senior Brother Li Baxian was the Vice Guardian Envoys of Pill Heart Sect. If a character like him was also participating in this Battle of Spirit Creek, how could a 5th Order like Lu Yi possibly compete? Li Baxian said, although heaven's fate is cruel, it won't send you to your deaths in vain. It will use its own methods to maintain a balance. Although the Battle of Spirit Creek will take place in the same small space, there will be an invisible suppression in that place. The further you go, the stronger the suppression. For example, if I enter that small space, I will only appear in the most central area, and if I go out, my cultivation will gradually be suppressed. On the contrary, if you enter with your current cultivation, you will only appear in the outermost area, and the cultivations of the people you encounter won't be too high. Therefore, when participating in the Battle of Spirit Creek, the higher your cultivation, the stronger the enemies you encounter will be. Of course, the Guardian Envoy's cultivation is at least 7th Order, and the Vice Envoys may be 7th Order or 6th Order. So there's such a good thing. Then there's no problem. Lu Yi became interested. Li Baxian glanced over at him. If it were an ordinary 5th Order boasting like this, he would definitely scoff, but this little junior brother of his, he really couldn't treat him as an ordinary 5th Order cultivator. After these days of teaching, he could feel Lu Ye's rapid growth. Shui Yuan said leisurely, Blue Blood Sect is not eligible to sign up. The Battle of Spirit Creek requires the Guardian Envoys and Vice Envoys to participate together. How can you go alone? Unless you can find a Vice Envoy to accompany you. Second Senior Sister's words sounded like she didn't approve of Lu Yi participating in the Battle of Spirit Creek, but she wasn't completely certain. Lu Yi could naturally feel her concern, but as his 4th Senior Brother said, his 2nd Senior Sister and Sect Master could protect him for a while, but they couldn't protect him forever. Therefore, if he wanted to participate in the Battle of Spirit Creek, he would need to find a Vice Envoy. Where could he find one? A suitable candidate needed to be someone he could trust and had a high enough cultivation. Otherwise, bringing a 3rd or 4th Order cultivator with him would only be a burden. There were many rogue cultivators, but Lu Yi had never been in contact with them. Without even mentioning the issue of trust, it was likely that none of the rogue cultivators would be willing to participate in the Battle of Spirit Creek. After all, it was a place where people could die at any time. After thinking about it for a long time, Yang Kai still couldn't figure it out. After eating, as usual, he was beaten by his fourth senior brother and dragged by his second senior sister to treat his injuries. At night, he entered the station to cultivate. On this day, while Lu Yi was cultivating, he suddenly felt an invisible force surge out from Sky Secret Hall and radiate throughout the station. He frowned, got up, and walked towards Sky Secret Hall. When he came to the Sky Secret Pillar to investigate the situation, he quickly understood the whole story. The results of the sect's grade assessment had come out. This assessment was a result of Heaven's secret and could not be interfered with by humans. Originally, the Jade Blood sect was going to be removed from the rankings in this assessment. However, with the addition of him as a disciple, the sect was barely able to remain. This was also because the sect had one Spirit Sea Stage cultivator and one True Lake Stage cultivator. Otherwise, an ordinary sect would not be able to retain a rank of Tier 9 with just 3 people. Heaven's Secret had its own set of standards for the assessment of a sect's grade, but generally speaking, it was directly related to the number of cultivators in the sect and the level of their cultivation. After confirming that there was no problem somewhere, Lu Yi returned to the cultivation room to cultivate. The next day, in Jade Blood sect's main sect, 2 figures collided. Sword and saber collided, and a harsh sound of friction rang out. The 2 figures were in a stalemate. Blood burst out from Lu Ye's chest and abdomen. He quickly turned around and held his saber vigilantly. On the opposite side, Li Baxian lowered his head and looked at his chest. There was a faint trace of blood there. He smiled slightly, put away his sword, and turned to look at Lu Yi. "Little junior brother, you passed. I have nothing left to teach you. In the future, when you fight with enemies, just trust your saber." This was the first time in a month that Lu Yi had injured Li Baxian. At the same level of cultivation, Li Baxian was simply an invincible existence. This made Lu Yi realize the power of the 10th place on the Spirit Stream list. Lu Yi put away his saber and bowed respectfully. "Thank you for your guidance, senior brother." Li Baxian threw out his wine gourd, which immediately expanded. He jumped lightly and stood on top of it. "The results of the sect's grade assessment are out. I have to return to Pill Heart sect to prepare. Little junior brother, I'll come to see you next time. If you encounter any trouble on the battlefield, remember to tell me." With that, he waved at Shui Yuan and faced the direction of the main hall. He bowed solemnly and straightened his body. The gourd carried him and turned into a stream of light, quickly disappearing into the distance. He left as soon as he said he would. He was truly carefree. Lu Yi watched him leave and asked the question that had been in his heart for many days. "Second senior sister, since fourth senior brother came from our sect, why did he become a disciple of Pill Heart sect?" It seemed that he also had a third senior brother who had joined another sect. However, fourth senior brother clearly treated this place as his home. The sect master and second senior sister did not treat him as an outsider. He came and went as he pleased. Chapter 179. In the end, Lu Yi couldn't figure out the answer to this question because his second senior sister didn't explain it to him. Maybe she didn't want to explain, or maybe she didn't think it was the right time. If she didn't say anything, Lu Yi naturally wouldn't ask. As usual, he soaked in the wooden tub full of medicinal liquid and was carefully treated by his second senior sister. His injuries quickly improved. When it was almost evening, Lu Yi walked out refreshed and Hoopa ran over to rub his head against him. During his time in the Blue Blood sect, Hoopa had clearly become much stronger. After all, he ate and slept well every day, and even swallowed a large number of spirit accumulation pills. Occasionally, he would run over to Lu Yi to eat a blood vein on his scales, so he was quite carefree. As for Lu Yi didn't know what she was busy with at the sect master's place. In the first few days, she was still following behind his second senior sister and mysteriously told Lu Yi that she wanted to learn how to become a medical cultivator from his second senior sister. Because along the way, Lu Yi had been injured too frequently. It was foreseeable that he would have to fight a lot in the future, so Yi's biggest wish was to become a medical cultivator. This way, even if she couldn't help much in battle, she could still treat Lu Ye's injuries after the battle. But after a few days, she disappeared. Lu Ye didn't know what happened, but it seemed that she wasn't learning well. As a result, she was now at the sect master's place every day. Perhaps she wanted to become a medical cultivator. As far as Lu Ye knew, the sect master was a medical cultivator named Seduso. He took out the scale armor and gave it to Hu Pe, who had leaned over and sucked on it. Hu Pe, who looked majestic, immediately stiffened and fell stiffly to the ground, his blood and chi churning. Second senior sister wasn't surprised. Lu Ye had told her about the origin of the scale armor. She had carefully studied it and determined that it had a strong body tempering effect. As long as one controlled their strength well and didn't refine too much at once, there wouldn't be any danger. Second senior sister also said that there must be some secret hidden under the dragon spring. Perhaps it was some kind of fortuitous encounter. If he was strong enough in the future, he could find an opportunity to take a look. Lu Ye still remembered that Han Jiyu from the Tai Luo sect. If it weren't for this woman exposing him at the Golden Light Summit, he wouldn't have had to fight so many Sixth Order cultivators. Lu Ye would remember this enmity. Sooner or later, he would get revenge. Lu Ye didn't pay any attention to Hu Pe, whose legs were kicking wildly as if he was about to die, and headed straight for the divination hall. A moment later, he appeared in the Tianji hall of the encampment. He raised his hand and tapped on the battlefield imprint to send out a message. Soon, there was a response. There aren't many people who meet the conditions. I've asked around, but no one dares to go. There are two who aren't afraid of death, but one is a fifth order and the other is a fourth order. I don't think Brother Lu is willing to bring a burden with him. Previously, he had asked Qin Yu to help him find suitable candidates to participate in the Battle of Spirit Creek. But now, it seemed that the situation was not optimistic. The Spirit Stream Garrison Battle was such a famous event that almost all cultivators had heard of it. However, the rogue cultivators gathered here generally didn't have high cultivations. Besides Qin Yu, who was a 7th Order cultivator, there were only a few 6th Order cultivators left. All of these people were cautious, or in other words, timid. With their strength, they could already venture into the inner circle of the battlefield. The reason why they stayed in the outer circle was because they were afraid. Every time the Battle of Spirit Creek occurred, the casualties would be great. How could they dare to participate in this kind of thing? Even Qin Yu didn't dare to agree. If he really had the courage to participate in the Battle of Spirit Creek, why would he stay in the outer circle? He would have run to the inner circle long ago. The rogue cultivators couldn't be counted on, and Lu Ye was already mentally prepared for this. Since that was the case, there was no other way. Lu Ye walked out of the divination hall and took out a foot-long fish from his storage bag. This fish was blood-red in color, as if it was made of blood jade. This was the blood-red trout of Moon Lake. Li Baxian had caught a lot of them during her stay in the Blue Blood sect, but most of them had been eaten. A small number had been taken by Lu Ye. A moment later, a huge shadow fell from the sky and landed in front of Lu Ye. A gust of wind blew past, causing Lu Ye's face to hurt. It was the gray eagle called Xiao Hui. It lowered its head and pecked lightly, catching the blood-red trout in its mouth and swallowing it whole. Previously, second senior brother had said that Xiao Hui liked to eat blood-red trout, so Lu Ye would occasionally bring a few over. However, it was impossible to get full from eating them. The difference in size was too great. Xiao Hui held the foot-long blood-red trout in its mouth like it was an earthworm. However, Xiao Hui really liked this kind of thing, so its attitude towards Lu Ye became much more cordial. For dozens of years, no one cared about it. It had been guarding the Blue Blood sect station, never leaving. It was only when Lu Ye arrived that it gained a bit of vitality. After eating the fish, Xiao Hui tilted its head and looked at Lu Ye, its eyes filled with anticipation. Lu Ye took out another one and tossed it over. Xiao Hui caught it accurately. Looking up at the eagle, Lu Ye said, "Xiao Hui, can you take me somewhere?" Little Gray looked down at him, then lowered its head and hooked Lu Ye's collar with its curved beak. Then with a light flick, it threw Lu Ye onto its back. Lu Ye's face suddenly went black. "Just nod your head, I can get up myself. You're making me lose face." Xiao Hui spread its wings and the wind gradually howled. Lu Yi felt his body suddenly become weightless as he soared into the sky. He quickly crouched down on the eagle's back while pushing his spirit chi to resist the wind. An eagle's cry rang out, as if it was asking Lu Yi which direction to go. Lu Yi took out his 10-year-old map and pointed it in a certain direction. The giant eagle immediately flew in that direction. Lu Yi hurriedly activated his battlefield mark and sent a message back to his second senior sister. A moment later, he received a reply, "Be careful on the road, come back soon." Crouching on the extremely spacious back of the eagle, Lu Yi truly understood what it meant to be as fast as lightning. Xiao Hui's speed was much faster than Tang Wu's flight-type spirit artifact. After all, this was a flying monster beast that had been around for several decades. Lu Yi seriously suspected that Xiao Hui's strength was comparable to a ninth-order master who had cultivated a heaven-grade secret art. However, due to the rules of the spirit stream battlefield, Xiao Hui was unable to break through. Thinking back to his second senior brother's artifact flight, Lu Yi couldn't help feeling a little fascinated. However, his current cultivation was still low, so if he wanted to fly, he would need to raise his realm. Generally, when a cultivator reached the 7th order, they would have the ability to fly, but if they wanted to, they would need to reach the 8th or 9th order. Only at that time would they have enough spirit chi to support flight for a period of time. After reaching the 9th order, one could switch to a heaven-grade secret art. Only by switching to a heaven-grade secret art would one be qualified to break through to the spirit stream realm and break through to the Cloud River realm. Once one reached the Cloud River realm, they would be able to fly. For Lu Yi, this was still a bit far away. Not only could Xiao Hui fly fast, but his endurance was also extremely high. After a full day and night, he finally landed to restore his strength. As for food, Lu Yi didn't need to worry about it as he could easily catch some of it from the wild and even ran over to share it with Lu Yi. For Lu Yi, the only thing that made him uncomfortable was that he needed to constantly push his spirit chi to protect himself from being frozen or blown off by the wind. There was basically no one flying in the sky of the outer circle, so the journey was extremely smooth. It wasn't until 5 days later that Lu Yi arrived at his destination at dusk. According to the map, this was Ying Mountain. He wanted to participate in the Battle of Spirit Stream, but he couldn't count on the rogue cultivators, so Lu Yi could only find a helper himself. However, he didn't know many people, so after thinking about it, he thought of Hua Ci. When he left Ying Mountain, this woman was a 5th order. After such a long time, she should be a 6th order cultivator. With such a cultivation, she was qualified to participate in the Battle of Spirit Stream. Most importantly, she was also a medical cultivator, so if he was injured, she could treat him. Of course, Lu Yi wouldn't force her to do anything. Everyone had their own aspirations, and Hua Ci was a medical cultivator who practiced medicine to help the world. She might not be willing to participate in such a chaotic battle. This time, he just came to give it a try. In addition, he had been saved twice, so the rogue cultivators didn't have a good time. Their situation wasn't safe either. Lu Yi thought that if possible, he could bring Hua Ci and the others to the Blue Blood sect, where they would at least have some guarantee of safety. He had thought about this when he left Ying Mountain, but at that time, he didn't even know where the Blue Blood sect's gate was, so he naturally couldn't make any promises rashly. The giant eagle slowly descended, bringing up a gust of strong wind. The bamboo buildings in the surroundings emitted creaking sounds as one figure after another scuttled out from the bamboo buildings. Many pairs of eyes looked at the giant eagle in fear and helplessness. Lu Yi saw Hua Ci and Ruan Lingyu as well as the burly Kong Niu, but there were a few more people he didn't know. Are they the new members of the Rogue Society recently? But what puzzled Lu Yi was that the cultivation of these unfamiliar faces was actually quite good. Among them, there was a 7th order and a 6th order. The 7th order cultivator shouted, "Which fellow Taoist has graced us with his presence?" At the same time, he stared at Lu Yi vigilantly, secretly releasing his spirit chi. Lu Yi looked at Hua Ci, and the smile on his face gradually faded. He saw an obvious scar on Hua Ci's white neck, which should have been caused by a sharp weapon. Such an obvious scar meant that the injury wasn't light, and judging from the angle and position of the scar, it didn't look like it was caused by someone else. Instead, it looked like Hua Ci had cut herself. Why did this woman choose to commit suicide? Lu Yi frowned. At that moment, Hua Si suddenly raised her hand and made a hand seal. A layer of gray qi visible to the naked eye swept out in all directions with her as the center. Ruan Lingyu, who was standing next to Hua Si, immediately shouted, quickly kill them. They are from Myriad Demon's Ridge. With a bang, Kong Nyo rushed towards a fifth-order cultivator and instantly engaged in a fierce battle with a strange face that Lu Yi had never seen before. Kong Nyo was now a fifth-order cultivator, so his opponent's strength was on par with his, but as soon as they clashed, the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivator was at a disadvantage because mushroom-like things were rapidly growing out of his opponent's mouth and nose, disrupting his mind. Chapter 180. The fifth-order cultivator wasn't the only one who suffered such a fate. The unfamiliar faces were the same, especially the seventh-order cultivator. His situation was especially serious. Small mushrooms suddenly grew out of his 7 orifices and he quickly wiped them away. Looking down, he saw that his hands were covered in blood. He quickly reacted and shouted, "Cheap slut, how dare you poison me?" As he spoke, he leaped up and charged towards Hua Si. Kong. Lu Yi stepped off the eagle's back and rushed towards Hua Si and Ruan Lingyu. He unsheathed his long saber and slashed horizontally. A fiery red light cut through the air, creating a shower of sparks as the huge force behind it forced the seventh-order master back. Lu Yi was also forced back 2 steps, but he quickly stabilized himself, stamped his foot on the floor of the bamboo house and rushed out. 2 silhouettes, one advancing and one retreating, clanking sounds could be heard as the 2 spirit weapons collided with each other. Lu Yi had never fought with a 7th-order cultivator since he started cultivating, so he immediately felt the pressure. However, he was now much stronger than he was during the battle at Golden Light Peak. Although his cultivation was still at the 5th order, his killing skills had greatly improved under the tempering of his 4th senior brother. The mountain coiling saber in his hand seemed to have a life of its own, slashing out rays of light. In just a few breaths of time, Lu Yi found an opportunity to slash the 7th-order cultivator's chest and abdomen. The 7th-order cultivator's spirit chi protection was broken, and a foot-long wound appeared on his chest and abdomen. The 7th-order cultivator staggered back with a look of shock on his face. He obviously didn't expect to be injured by a 5th-order cultivator. He didn't have time to think as Lu Yi rushed forward again. After a few more breaths of time, another wound appeared on the 7th-order cultivator's body. The shock in his eyes had already turned into horror because he found that this 5th-order origin realm cultivator who had appeared out of nowhere was even faster and stronger than himself. What frightened him even more was that the saber in his opponent's hand was extremely lethal, and once he was struck, he would definitely be injured. Double images appeared in front of his eyes and his ears began to buzz. He didn't know what poison he had been poisoned with, but his spirit chi was rapidly draining away, accompanied by colorful mushrooms growing out of his orifices. These mushrooms were rapidly devouring his spirit chi. He had to end the battle quickly and capture that lowly servant girl to cure the poison. With that thought, he made a prompt decision. He reached into his storage bag and took out a spirit weapon, shouting, "Go!" The spirit artifact immediately turned into a stream of light and shot towards Lu Yi at lightning speed. A 7th-order cultivator could already cultivate the way of artifact manipulation. When the stream of light appeared, Lu Ye's hair stood on end. A huge sense of crisis enveloped him. His eyes quickly fixed on the stream of light. Time seemed to slow down at this moment. He saw the angle and direction of the stream of light, and saw the spirit weapon wrapped in the stream of light. Tempering his body in the dragon pond and the scales he obtained from the dragon pond not only strengthened his physique, but also his eyesight. In simple terms, his eyesight would be able to catch things faster, and at the same time, his reaction would also be faster. They couldn't block it. At this moment, it was too late to swing his saber. The speed of the flowing light was too fast. When Lu Yi urged his spirit energy, a spirit inscription appeared on his chest. His spirit energy continued to pour into it. With a bang, the spirit energy exploded. Lu Yi grunted. He tasted something sweet in his throat and his mouth was full of the taste of rust. His feet were firmly rooted to the ground, but his whole body was pushed by a powerful force. His feet plowed 2 deep marks on the ground. Yi! Ruan Lingyu, who was standing next to Hua Si, exclaimed. Her face turned pale. At the same time, Hua Si gritted her teeth and changed her hand's seal. Asterisk pu piu piu. Asterisk a series of muffled sounds rang out. The small mushrooms that grew out of the 7th Order cultivator's orifices exploded one by one. Spores spread all over his face. The cultivator immediately screamed. His whole face seemed to have been poured with strong acid. It made a ripping sound as his flesh and blood became a mess. Lu Yi raised his saber and cut off the continuous stream of light on his chest. His figure rushed out, and under the horrified gaze of the 7th Order cultivator, he stabbed with his saber. The mountain-coiling saber enhanced with sharpness spirit inscriptions pierced through the cultivator's heart and came out from his back. Lu Yi pulled out the saber and blood gushed out. Another scream rang out. Lu Yi turned his head and saw that the 6th Order cultivator was being held in Xiao Hui's beak. He didn't know how he provoked Xiao Hui, or if Xiao Hui took the initiative to attack him. The huge beak closed, and the cultivator was split in half. Blood and internal organs poured out. At the same time, Kong Niu also finished off his opponent. In terms of strength, Kong Niu might not be a match for Hua Si. After all, he had just reached the 5th Order. However, these outsiders were all unknowingly poisoned by Hua Si's poison. When Hua Si detonated the hidden poison, their strength decreased. In the middle of a life-and-death battle, small mushrooms suddenly grew out of one's orifices. Anyone would be frightened, especially when those small mushrooms were rapidly absorbing one's spirit chi to grow. The hasty battle ended. Lu Yi shook off the blood on his long saber and returned it to its sheath. He rubbed his stuffy chest. Although the defensive spirit inscriptions had blocked the damage of the spiritual weapon, there was no way to alleviate the force of the collision. Who is it? Lu Yi frowned. He had just arrived here and hadn't realized what had happened. Hua Si suddenly attacked, followed by Ruan Lingyu's shout, and the battle broke out. A few stray dogs from the inner circle, Hua Si explained faintly. She looked at Lu Yi with concern. Are you okay? Lu Yi shook his head. Come in and talk. Hua Si walked into the bamboo house. Lu Yi raised his foot and followed. Ruan Lingyu stayed outside and cleaned up the battlefield with Kong Niu and the others. After entering the house, Hua Si poured him a glass of water. Lu Yi saw a trace of relief in her tired face. Obviously, she hadn't been doing well during this time. Lu Yi took a sip of water. Are we being targeted? Although Hua Si didn't say much, Lu Yi could vaguely guess what was going on. He had been worried about this since he was in Ying Mountain. Hua Si was quite famous in the nearby market. Many injured cultivators would come to her for treatment. Although they could earn some cultivation resources by doing this, if they were targeted by a powerful cultivator from the Myriad Devil Ridge one day, the people of the Scattered Wandering Club would not be able to resist. However, this was the outermost circle of the battlefield. Hua Si herself was a 5th Order cultivator, and the Scattered Wanderers Club had more or less enough power to protect themselves. However, life couldn't always be so smooth. In the end, Hua Si was targeted. At first, it was because a 7th Order cultivator was injured. He came to Hua Si for treatment because of her reputation. The other party was from the Myriad Demon Ridge camp. Hua Si naturally didn't want to, but because her fists weren't as big as his, she could only treat him. After the 7th Order cultivator's injury was healed, he refused to leave and made an even more excessive request. He wanted Hua Si to earn spirit stones for him to cultivate. In his view, a Scattered Wanderer's medical cultivator was a money tree. As long as he could control Hua Si, this money tree, he wouldn't have to take the risk of going to the inner circle. It was because he was injured in a fight in the inner circle that he ran back to the outer circle. This situation had been going on for more than 20 days. During these days, Hua Si gave all the spirit stones she earned in the market to the other party in exchange for the safety of Ruan Lingyu and the others. Where are the others? The last time she came, there were still a dozen people from the Scattered Wanderers Club, but this time, there were only 3 left. They were killed. Hua Xiai sighed. The seventh order cultivator wanted to control Hua Xiai, but Kong Niu and the others were unwilling. A conflict broke out between them and the Scattered Wanderers Club, and only a few people were left. If it weren't for Hua Xiai threatening with her own life, she was afraid that the entire Scattered Wanderers Club would have been killed. That was how the scar on her neck came to be. Until today, when Lu Yi suddenly came, Hua Xiai almost didn't hesitate to take action because she knew that no matter what Lu Yi came here for, once he understood her situation, he would definitely take action. Since that was the case, she had to take the initiative. Fortunately, Lu Yi was stronger than she imagined and smoothly took care of the seventh order cultivator. Noticing Lu Ye's gaze, Hua Xiai raised her hand to cover the scar and showed her usual gentle smile. Anyway, I have to thank you. Lu Yi waved his hand. Without me, they probably wouldn't have lived long. He did not know what Hua Xiai had done to those people, but Lu Yi had seen the miserable state they were in just now. He knew that even without him, Hua Xiai would be able to kill those people after some time. Of course, she would have to take some risks. Hua Xiai was a medical cultivator, but medical cultivators could also kill. According to Lu Ye's knowledge, there were some medical cultivators who liked to use poison and were called poison doctors. These people could often kill people without leaving a trace, and those who were killed by them all died miserable deaths. Let's not talk about me. What about you, the famous Lu Yi? Why are you here instead of enjoying life in the Blue Blood sect? Did you lose something here? She had obviously heard about the battle at the Golden Light Summit. Veins popped out on Lu Ye's forehead. My name is Lu Yi. Hua Xiai looked surprised. I remember someone telling me that his surname is Lu and his name is Yi. Was he lying to me? She looked at Lu Yi faintly and slowly shook her head. Sure enough, men's words can't be trusted. She sighed again. But forget it, who told you to save me? As the old saying goes, if you can't repay a life-saving grace, you can only repay it with your body. Her tone gradually weakened. Lu Yi raised his brow and looked at Hua Xiai, only to see her lowering her head shyly. As she spoke, the jade hand covering her neck slowly slid down and rested on her lapel. Lu Yi suddenly felt his mouth go dry and his eyes go blank. Isn't this happiness coming too fast? The hero saves the beauty, and the beauty throws herself into his arms. Does this also happen to me? Hua Xiai smoothed out the wrinkles on her lapel, her movements meticulous. Lu Yi looked up and met a pair of teasing eyes. Lu Yi closed his eyes and took a deep breath, looking forward to seeing this woman in front of him. I really am a piece of shit. Chapter 181. Inside the bamboo house, Hua Xiai smiled sweetly while Lu Yi looked indignant. After a while, Hua Xia chuckled and said, You saved me once, and I saved you twice. You still owe me one. Even if you want to repay me with your body, you should be the one to repay me with your body. What you said makes sense. Lu Yi nodded. How could he refuse such a good thing? As he spoke, he took 2 steps forward and undressed. Hua Xi's smile remained as she looked at him. Lu Yi unbuttoned his shirt and was about to take off his pants when Hua Xi's eyebrows twitched. Sister Hua Xiai. Ling Yu suddenly pushed the door open and entered. She met Lu Ye's gaze, who was unbuttoned and holding up his pants. The atmosphere suddenly became quiet. Sorry to disturb you. Ling Yu quickly retreated and gently closed the door. Her heart was beating wildly and her cheeks were burning. She didn't know when Hua Xiai and Brother Qi. No wonder Brother Yi came all the way here to find Sister Hua Xiai. In the room, Lu Yi slowly put on his clothes and nodded at Hua Xiai. You're amazing. Hua Xiai took a sip of water and said lazily, So, what are you here for this time? Lu Yi calmed himself down and explained his purpose of coming. Hua Xiai nodded. I'll think about it. Lu Yi didn't force her. This kind of thing couldn't be forced. Okay, take your time to think about it. He turned around and walked out. He saw Kong Niu standing there and their eyes met. Kong Niu forced a smile that was uglier than crying at Lu Yi. Ruan Lingyu stood aside with a red face, as if she didn't dare to look at Lu Yi. From time to time, she would steal glances. Lu Yi felt the need to explain to her that the little girl seemed to be frightened just now. However, before he could say anything, Ruan Lingyu spoke first. Brother Yi, you're done so quickly? After saying that, she realized that her words were inappropriate and continued, I mean, don't you need to spend more time with Sister Hua Ci? Lu Yi took a deep breath and decided not to say anything. The door behind him opened and Hua Ci stepped out. I've thought about it. So fast? Lu Yi was stunned. Aren't you pretty fast too? Hua Ci teased. Lu Yi stared at Hua Ci's slender, fair neck and resisted the urge to strangle her to death. She suddenly realized that she had made a terrible mistake in coming to Hua Ci. This kind of woman should be left to fend for herself. Hua Ci explained to Ruan Lingyu and Kong Niu, you've heard that Yi is a disciple of the Jade Blood Sect. He's here to bring us to the Jade Blood Sect. I've decided to go with him. If you two are willing, you can come with us. If not, you can go on your own. Only then did Ruan Lingyu understand why Lu Yi had come all the way here. She nodded excitedly. I'm willing. Kong Niu remained silent and only nodded slightly. Shall we go then? Hua Ci looked at Lu Yi. Let's go. Lu Yi waved his hand. Things went unexpectedly smoothly this time. Originally, he was wondering if he should persuade Hua Ci if she refused, but he didn't expect her to agree so readily. It must have something to do with what happened to the Scattered Wanderers Club. Originally, the club had 11 members, but now, only 3 were left. This time, Lu Yi happened to be there and helped Hua Ci kill the 7th Order cultivator, but there was no guarantee that she wouldn't encounter such a thing again. She wouldn't be so lucky every time. Going to the Jade Blood Sect with Lu Yi was different. With Lu Ye's help, she shouldn't encounter such a thing again. The back of the giant eagle was very spacious, more than enough for 4 people to sit on. When the giant eagle flapped its wings and soared into the sky, Kong Niu's face instantly turned pale and Ruan Lingyu screamed. Only Hua Ci remained calm, but her clenched fists showed the uneasiness in her heart. After the initial discomfort, Ruan Lingyu soon became excited. She opened her arms and shouted from time to time. Even Hua Ci looked down from time to time, like a little girl who had never seen the world. Kong Niu sat upright, his face as pale as paper. Lu Yi saw that he was in a bad state and asked with concern, Kong Niu, are you okay? Kong Niu's lips squirmed, and he spat out a few words with difficulty, I'm fine, it's too high. Hua Ci and Ruan Lingyu both looked at Kong Niu in surprise. They didn't expect this tall and sturdy man to have such a weak side. It took Lu Yi almost 5 days to get here, and it was the same on the way back. A few days later, the giant eagle landed on the square of the Jade Blood Sect station. Several people jumped down one by one. Kong Niu knelt on the ground with a thud, gasping for breath, like a drowning man crawling out of the water. The little girl, Ruan Lingyu, patted his back gently. Hua Ci held her hands in front of her stomach and looked around. Is this the Jade Blood Sect station? Lu Yi took out a blood-red trout to reward Xiao Hui and nodded. It's a bit desolate. After all, no one has taken care of it for decades. After eating a few blood-red trout, Xiao Hui spread his wings and flew away, landing on a nearby mountain. Lu Yi urged the battlefield mark to send a message to his second senior sister to report that he was safe. Only then did he lead Hua Ci and the others to walk around the station. Speaking of which, Lu Yi didn't know much about his own station. There were many places that he hadn't been to before. The place he went the most was the cultivation room, where he mainly cultivated. This exploration had its own fun. After finding a place for Hua Ci and the others to stay, he led Hua Ci and the others to walk around the market. It was Lu Ye's first time coming to the market. Chen Yu didn't know where he got the news and hurried to receive him. He seemed to think that Lu Yi was here to investigate the market, so he was very careful. He was naturally more attentive to Hua Ci and the others, who followed Lu Yi and obviously had a special relationship with him. The market of the Jade Blood Sect was not small. It was larger than any of the markets that Lu Yi had seen before. It was located at the outermost area of the station. Rogue cultivators were cautious people. Even if no one had come to the Jade Blood Sect station for decades, they still didn't dare to go inside. Therefore, although it was bustling here, it didn't affect the station much. On the contrary, it was more lively. Having a market here was actually more convenient for Lu Yi because he mainly consumed spirit pills when he cultivated. However, he had more spirit stones now, so he could use spirit stones to buy spirit pills here. When Qinyu learned that Hua Ci was a medical cultivator, his attitude became even more enthusiastic. There were very few medical cultivators here. Once they were injured in a fight, those in good conditions would take some healing pills, while those in poor conditions could only rely on themselves to slowly recover. It was foreseeable that if Hua Ci opened a medical clinic here, business would definitely be booming. After walking around, Hua Ci and the others more or less understood this place. Lu Yi told them to act on their own and left. He hadn't returned to the sect for more than 10 days. Although he had sent a message to his second senior sister to tell her that he was safe, she was still a little worried. When he returned to the sect through the Tianji pillar, his second senior sister had already prepared a table of medicinal dishes. Lu Yi stuffed himself with food, but without his fourth senior brother beside him, it was a little less lively. Shui Yuan's didn't eat much, so she made them for Lu Yi. She picked up some food for Lu Yi and said, "If you think the people you brought back are trustworthy, you can accept them into the sect." Lu Yi's mouth was muffled. "Can I?" Shui Yuan smiled. "You're the guardian, so you have the right to decide whether to accept people or not. Before, you didn't accept people because of the situation, but now that you've opened your mouth, it doesn't matter anymore. Not only do you have to accept them, but you have to accept more. This is related to the future of the sect, and you can accept as many as you want. This way, if something happens at the station in the future, such as being declared war, you'll have people you can use." "Got it. You can consider the matter of accepting people on your own. The old man and I don't have any objections. Those rogue cultivators don't matter, but if you want to accept them into the sect, you have to bring them back to the sect. I have to register them and investigate their origins." While they were eating, Yi ran over and sat beside Lu Yi, looking at him with a smile. "What's the good news?" Lu Yi looked at her. "Nothing." Yi shook her head. "I haven't seen you for a few days, so I came to see you." "So mysterious." Lu Yi swallowed the food in his mouth. "Right, I have something to tell you. Do you still remember that girl Lingyu?" "Yes, and Sister Hua Ci and the others." He nodded, then suddenly became nervous. "What happened to them?" "Something happened at the Scattered Wanderers Society, and only 3 of them are left. Don't worry, Hua Ci and Lingyu are fine. I've already brought them to the station." His eyes widened. "You brought Lingyu to the station?" After saying this, she rushed out and said, "I'll go see Lingyu." Then he heard Yi shout, "Hoopa hoopa! Wait for me." Lu Yi turned around and shouted, but there was no response. He couldn't help but shake his head. "You're in such a hurry." After finishing everything on the table in 2 or 3 bites, Lu Yi patted his stomach and stood up. "Second senior sister, I'll bring her into the station." "Go," Shui Yuan's replied and cleaned up the dishes. Lu Yi walked out and looked around, but he couldn't find Yi and Hoopa. In the end, he confirmed that they were no longer in the sect. Walking into the station, he finally found Yi, who was chatting happily with Lingyu. Lu Yi looked at her in confusion. "How did you get in here?" Yi was Hoopo's companion soul, and Hoopo was Yi's pet beast. Logically speaking, without Lu Yi and the others, they couldn't enter the station. Yi raised her right hand proudly. As she circulated her spiritual power, a battlefield imprint appeared on the back of her hand. Lu Yi was surprised. "You have a battlefield imprint too?" "The sect master branded it for me." Yi giggled. "I'm also a disciple of the Jade Blood sect." "That worked?" Lu Yi was a little shocked. But then again, this was a good thing. If Yi had a battlefield imprint, she could enter and leave the station with Hooper at any time and wouldn't be restricted by Lu Yi. "So, you're my junior sister?" Lu Yi suddenly reacted. He stood up and bowed respectfully to Lu Yi. Jade Blood Sect disciple Lu Yi greets senior brother Yi. Lu Yi immediately raised his hand to slap her. "I think you're looking for a beating." Yi shrieked and immediately hid behind Hua Ci. Then she stuck her little head out and stuck her tongue out at Lu Yi. Chapter 182. On the second day after bringing Hua Ci and the others back, Lu Yi used her authority as a guardian to bring them back to the sect after consulting with the 3 of them. Shui Yuan used her status as a palm guardian to brand Hua Si and the others with the Jade Blood Sect's battlefield mark. After paying respects to the sect master, Hua Si and the others officially became disciples of the Jade Blood Sect. At this point, including Yi, the Jade Blood Sect had 5 disciples in the Spirit Stream realm. Ruan Lingyu was very happy, and even the dull Kong Nyo smiled a little more. Their days as rogue cultivators had been very poor, but from today onwards, they were members of a sect. As for Huaxia, Lu Yi could feel that she didn't have a strong desire to join a sect. If she really wanted to join a sect, with her current status as a 6th order medical cultivator, she could go to any sect in the outer circle and be valued. Medical cultivators would always be indispensable talents in any sect. This time, she was willing to join the Jade Blood Sect because of her previous experience. She wanted Ruan Lingyu and Kong Nyo to have a more stable life, and also because of Lu Yi. Now that she thought about it, she had the idea of recruiting Lu Yi into the Scattered Society, but she didn't mention it because she considered which great force Lu Yi belonged to. In the end, the Scattered Society was gone, and she joined the Jade Blood Sect. It could only be said that the world was wonderful beyond words. After becoming a disciple of the Jade Blood Sect, she would receive a monthly salary. This was a benefit that every sect had. It was the first time she received her monthly salary from Shui Yuan. Ruan Lingyu smiled and cried, and Yi comforted her for a while. In the cultivation room of the sect, Lu Yi spent a lot of effort to construct spirit-gathering spirit runes in several rooms. This way, when Hua Si and the others cultivated here in the future, their efficiency would be higher. Now that they had joined the Jade Blood Sect, their second senior sister gave them a lot of monthly salary, so they didn't have to worry about cultivation resources for a short time. Walking out of the cultivation room, Hua Si was waiting outside. She had just entered her cultivation room to test it out and found that the world energy inside was unbelievably rich. She was really shocked by Lu Ye's work and vaguely understood why Lu Ye's cultivation could improve so quickly. "What's the matter?" Lu Yi looked at her. Hua Si said, "You went to Ing Mountain to find me because of the Spirit Stream garrison battle? Who told you that?" Lu Yi was surprised. He hadn't had the chance to tell Hua Si about this yet. He had originally planned to discuss it with her in 2 days, but he hadn't expected her to have received the news in advance. "Chen Yu said so. He said that you wanted to find someone from the loose cultivators to accompany you, but there wasn't anyone suitable." Lu Yi nodded. "I do have such considerations. Why didn't you tell me then? Are you afraid that I would drag you?" "That's not it. I just didn't have the time. Since you know, what do you think? You sex the sex stream is a sect sex the sect. Lu Yi sect. Sex Lu sex? If a 5th order like you isn't afraid, why should a 6th order be?" Hua Si smiled sweetly. Lu Yi nodded and turned to walk towards Divine Secret Hall. But after walking a short distance, he came back and looked at Hua Si seriously. "The garrison envoys of other sects have at least a 7th order. It will be dangerous if you go in. Are you really going?" "Yes." Hua Si pursed her lips and smiled. "If I don't go, who will collect your corpse?" Lu Yi snorted and turned to leave. Soon he arrived at Divine Secret Hall. Using his authority as a garrison envoy, he connected to the Divine Secret Pillar and spent 500 merit points to buy a blessing. In an instant, he felt some wonderful changes take place inside the Divine Secret Pillar in front of him. Accompanied by a cracking sound, the Divine Secret Pillar rotated twice. Immediately after, the surrounding heaven and earth spiritual chi began to surge and become denser. This was the effect of the Divine Secret Pillar's blessing. The original Divine Secret Pillar could only make the world energy in the sex station 10% richer than in the wild. Another blessing could increase it by another 10%. In other words, the world energy in Blue Blood Sex Station was 20% richer than in the wild. Lu Yi tried to buy another blessing but failed because he had run out of merit points. According to the feedback from his garrison envoy Mark, the second blessing would cost 1,000 merit points. He didn't know how much the third one would cost. Fourth senior brother had said before that the Divine Secret Pillar's blessing would become more expensive the further it was used, so this kind of thing wasn't something a single cultivator could afford. It required the efforts of the entire sect to accumulate merit points. In addition, Lu Yi, as a garrison envoy, could make some adjustments to the range of the divine secret pillar's blessing. He could limit the effect of this blessing to certain areas. In other words, if he wanted to, this blessing couldn't be applied to the market where the rogue cultivators were. With this blessing, Blue Blood Sect Station would be eligible to sign up for the Spirit Stream Garrison Battle. Lu Yi fiddled with it for a while before figuring out how to sign up. As the divine secret pillar fell, the battlefield envoy mark heated up slightly and a lot of information poured into his mind. There were still a few days before the Spirit Stream Garrison Battle officially began, and before that, Lu Yi could raise his cultivation to the 6th order. He was now only one step away from that realm. This was the reason why he wanted to participate in the Spirit Stream Garrison Battle. If he was only a 5th order, he would still be a little weak, but if he reached the 6th order, the situation would be different. Blue Blood Sect's main sect, inside the main hall of the Garrison Peak, Lu Yi and Hua Ci came together. "Sect Master, were you looking for us?" Lu Yi cupped his fists and saluted while Hua Ci also performed a disciple's salute. The Sect Master, who was standing there, turned around and asked, "Your second senior sister said that you are preparing to participate in the Spirit Stream Garrison Battle and have already signed up?" "It's good to see the world," the Sect Master nodded slightly. Blue Blood Sect hasn't accepted any disciples for several dozen years, but now that you've joined, the sect has become much livelier. Unfortunately, these old bones of mine can't help you much. Last time, I almost killed you. Lu Yi quickly said, since this disciple has joined Blue Blood Sect, it is only natural for this disciple to take care of the sect's grievances. Moreover, this disciple was able to turn misfortune into fortune in the end thanks to the sect's prestige, so Sect Master doesn't need to worry about it. The Sect Master stroked his beard. "It's hard for you to think so," letting out a sigh, he said, "Come with me, I'll take you to a place." Saying so, the Sect Master walked out with Lu Yi and Hua Ci hurriedly following. Outside the main hall, the Sect Master waved his sleeve and sent out a burst of spiritual energy, wrapping Lu Yi and Hua Ci up before flying up into the sky. A moment later, they landed on top of a Spirit Stream peak. Lu Yi turned his head and saw the Garrison Peak not far away. In other words, this place was not far from the Garrison Peak, so it was likely they were still inside Blue Blood Sect's main sect. At the top of the Garrison Peak was a building that looked like a palace but wasn't. It had a strange shape. Standing in front of the building, the Sect Master turned back to Lu Yi and Hua Ci and said, "Wait here." Turning around, the Sect Master straightened his expression and walked forward. Outside the hall, Hua Ci touched Lu Ye's arm and their eyes met, inquiring. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. He had never been here before and didn't know why the Sect Master had brought him and Hua Ci here. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he suddenly heard a woman's voice from inside. "Old thing, you actually have the face to come find me?" Lu Yi was startled. There was actually someone here? Just as he was feeling surprised, a gust of wind blew over and with Lu Ye's eyesight, he vaguely saw a black shadow fly out of the building and hit a big tree outside, causing a loud bang. With his clothes fluttering, Lu Ye's cheeks were stung by the wind. Turning around, he narrowed his eyes and his expression changed greatly. Quickly stepping forward with Hua Ci, he helped the Sect Master up from the ground. The Sect Master's left eye was bruised and there was a clear fist mark. "Sect Master, this?" Lu Yi had no idea what had happened, only that a woman lived here and that woman had punched the Sect Master. "It's fine, it's fine." The Sect Master gently patted the clothes on his chest and explained to Lu Yi, "An old friend of this old master lives here. Her personality is a bit irritable. I'll go talk to her again, you just wait here." Lu Yi and Hua Ci watched speechlessly as the Sect Master walked into the building again. "Scram, if you dare come in again, this old lady will break all 3 of your legs." There was another angry roar. Then, the sect leader was sent flying again. He crashed into the same tree and slowly slid down. This time, the Sect Master's right eye was also bruised, 2 fist marks, one on the left and one on the right, extremely symmetrical. "Sect Master?" Lu Yi couldn't bear to watch. The Sect Master raised his hand. "It's fine, Just let her vent her anger. Standing up, he walked forward for the third time. Even if there were millions of people, he would still go. Soon, spiritual energy fluctuations came from inside again, accompanied by a woman's cursing. Lu Yi and Hua Si stood outside and trembled with fear, fearing that the sect master would be thrown out again. But this time, the sect master wasn't thrown out, and the cursing inside gradually stopped. The situation developed a bit too quickly, and Lu Yi couldn't wrap his head around it. Hua Si leaned over and whispered in his ear, "The person living here is most likely one of the sect master's old lovers." Nonsense. Lu Yi rolled his eyes. "Didn't you see the sect master get hammered?" Hua Si chuckled, "You're still young, you don't understand women." "You do? I'm a woman, of course I understand." Hua Si puffed out her chest. Lu Yi felt that what she said made a lot of sense and was suddenly speechless. After a while, the sect master's dignified voice came from inside. "Come in, both of you." Lu Yi and Hua Si immediately straightened their faces and respectfully answered, "Yes," before walking into the building one after the other. After stepping through the door and entering the interior, Lu Ye's expression was stunned. This building didn't look big from the outside, but the inside was a completely different world. On the walls of the entire building, mysterious spirit patterns swam like fish, appearing and disappearing from time to time, changing unpredictably. He looked at the spirit patterns and was surprised that he didn't recognize a single one. They were in a large hall, and the sect master was standing there. Beside him stood a graceful woman. The woman's age seemed to be a mystery. At first glance, she seemed to be in her 20s, but if one looked carefully, there was a sense of vicissitudes in her eyes. Chapter 183. The woman couldn't be too young because the sect leader said that she was an old friend of his. Conservatively speaking, she should be someone from the same generation as the sect leader. She looked young because of her beauty. "This is Madame Yun," the sect leader introduced. Lu Yi and Hua Si both bowed. "Greetings, Madame Yun." Madame Yun nodded slightly and looked at Lu Yi from head to toe. She said, "That old fart said that you had some fortuitous encounter in the spirit stream battlefield, and one of them was the inheritance of a spirit tattooist?" She didn't know how this misunderstanding got out, but it probably had something to do with his ability to activate spirit tattoos in battle. Lu Yi turned to look at the sect leader, who nodded slightly. Lu Yi replied, "Yes." No matter how he thought about it, the talent tree was related to the inheritance of a spirit tattooist. "Activate your spirit tattoos for me to see," Madame Yun instructed. Lu Yi hesitated for a moment before opening his palm and activating a defensive spirit tattoo. Madame Yun revealed a look of surprise. "This speed?" She only heard from the sect leader that this little guy called Lu Ye's fortuitous encounter was related to a spirit tattooist, so she didn't ask too much. Only now did she know that this little guy in front of her had mastered spirit tattoos to the extent that he could activate them at will. However, she was also an experienced and knowledgeable person. If the disciples of those top sects studied spirit tattoos from a young age, they might have a chance to do it. She stepped forward and lowered her head to check the spirit tattoo in Lu Ye's hand. "This is a defensive. Your spirit tattoo." She suddenly frowned. No one knew what she had discovered, but she actually grabbed Lu Ye's hand and looked at it seriously. Lu Yi cast a pleading look at the sect leader. The sect leader slowly shook his head, indicating for him to calm down. After a long while, Madame Yun put down Lu Ye's hand and fell into deep thought with a leisurely expression. Seeing this, the sect leader asked, "What's wrong with his spirit tattoo?" "There's no problem." Madame Yun shook her head. "It's just a little different from the spirit tattoos of the 9 provinces, but it's more reasonable. As for the specific differences, we still have to do some comparisons." As she spoke, she looked at Lu Yi. "Do you know any other spirit tattoos?" Lu Yi said truthfully, "I know 3 more." "Show it to me." Lu Yi activated Sharpness, Spirit Gathering, and Blood Stain, one by one. After careful inspection, Madame Yun said with certainty, "The inheritance you obtained is somewhat extraordinary. The person who left behind this inheritance must have extremely high attainments in the path of spiritual tattoos." The headmaster was surprised. It was rare to hear Madame Yun have such a high evaluation of others. He asked curiously, "How is he compared to you?" Madame Yun shook her head. "He's more powerful than me. This person's Tao of spirit veins has already surpassed the current system of the 9 provinces. It's another way of displaying it, but every type of spirit veins is much more powerful than the ones in the 9 provinces." She looked at Lu Yi again. "How much do you know about the Tao of spirit veins?" Lu Yi sweated. "I only know how to use these 4 spirit runes. I don't know anything else." Madame Yun was surprised. She laughed in spite of herself and said, "It seems that the inheritance you received is not complete. This is a common occurrence." There were indeed many fortuitous encounters in the spirit stream battlefield. There were also many people who obtained inheritances left behind by unknown experts. However, some inheritances became incomplete due to various reasons. From Madame Yun's point of view, Lu Yi could activate the 4 spirit runes as he wished, but he didn't know much about spiritual tattoos. This was obviously the reason why the inheritance was incomplete. A complete inheritance would at least allow Lu Yi to understand the construction method and basic characteristics of spiritual tattoos. "In the future, you can come and visit me often. You provide me with these spirit runes to study, and in return, I can teach you some knowledge about spiritual tattoos. How about it?" As soon as she said this, the headmaster, who was standing beside Madame Yun, shot a glance at Lu Yi. Lu Yi understood tacitly. "Yes, thank you, senior." Madame Yun nodded with a smile. Her expression when looking at Lu Yi became much more amiable. The headmaster coughed lightly. "Don't forget about the proper business. Follow me." Madame Yun walked to the side as she spoke. She led the 3 of them through a long corridor and arrived at a room. The room wasn't big, and there was a bed in the middle. There was also a stool at the side. After entering the room, Madame Yun formed a seal with one hand and tapped lightly on the wall. Spiritual energy surged, and the entire room became brightly lit, as if a few strong lamps were shining. However, the light wasn't intense, but rather gentle. "Take off your clothes and climb on," Madame Yun instructed. Lu Yi didn't understand. The headmaster said, "Madame Yun will tattoo a spiritual tattoo on your body. This type of spiritual tattoo is called an inscription. It can display the effects of a spiritual tattoo. Perhaps it will be of some help in the Battle of Lingxi." This was the first time Lu Yi heard of such a thing, and he was instantly curious. However, thinking that this was the reason why the headmaster brought him and Hua Ci here, he didn't hesitate. He took off his clothes and climbed on the bed. Madame Yun sat on a stool at the side and took out a jade box. She opened it, and inside the jade box were thin needles of different lengths. "Where is it?" Madame Yun extended her hand to the headmaster. The headmaster took out a bottle and handed it to her. She opened the bottle and sniffed it lightly. She raised her eyebrows and said, "The blood of a true lake-stage great demon. Which demonic beast is it?" The headmaster replied, "Hua Fang." "That's rare." Madame Yun nodded, then teased, "It's rare for you to be so generous." The headmaster looked embarrassed and didn't reply. Madame Yun took out a long needle from the jade box and immersed it in Hua Fang's blood. She activated her spiritual energy, and the long needle immediately seemed to come to life. It drank the demonic beast's blood and instantly turned dark red. She lifted the long needle and pressed it on Lu Ye's shoulder blade. "It will hurt a little. Bear with it." As her voice fell, she took the long needle and pierced it into Lu Ye's back. Lu Yi immediately felt as if he was being pricked by a needle, followed by a burning pain. This pain wasn't intense, but it made one's heart itch, making it difficult to endure. He gritted his teeth. Madame Yun's hand was very steady. She changed the thin needles in her hand one after another. Her movements were sometimes fast and sometimes slow. Even her spiritual energy fluctuations were constantly changing with her movements. Hua Ci stood to the side and watching as a strange spiritual tattoo pattern slowly appeared on Lu Ye's back. After a full 2 hours, the last needle was inserted. Madame Yun breathed a sigh of relief and gently patted Lu Ye's back. "It's done." Lu Yi stood up and sensed his surroundings. He could faintly feel that there was something behind him. It was a strange feeling, as if it had merged with his body, but it also felt like an external object. He could feel that if he channeled his spiritual energy, he could even activate it. The headmaster explained from the side, "Your current cultivation is still low, so it's not suitable for you to tattoo permanent spiritual tattoos. This time, Madame Yun gave you a temporary tattoo. If you encounter a powerhouse you can't defeat, you can activate it with your spiritual energy and it will give you the ability to fly. This spiritual tattoo is called Flying Wings," Madame Yun added. "If you use it with all your strength, it can only allow you to fly for 6 hours at most. Any longer and this tattoo will lose its effect." A flying spiritual tattoo. Lu Ye's heart trembled as he felt the headmaster's concern. He and Hua Ci were going to participate in the spirit stream battle, so they couldn't improve their strength too much, but with this flying wings tattoo, even if they encountered a powerhouse they couldn't defeat, they would have a chance to escape. However, the price of this tattoo was not small. Not to mention the need for a skilled craftsman like Madame Yun, even Huafang's blood was a rare treasure. Using the blood of a true Lake Realm great monster on a spirit stream realm cultivator like Lu Yi was really a waste. Lu Yi was deeply moved. "What are you waiting for?" Madame Yun suddenly asked with a sullen face. The headmaster and Lu Yi hurriedly walked out awkwardly. The door was tightly shut. The headmaster led Lu Yi out of the main hall. "Flying requires practice to master the basics. Yi, do you want to try it now?" the headmaster asked. "I was thinking the same thing," Lu Yi nodded, feeling a little excited. Although Yang Kai had experienced flying through the air before, he had always been carried by others and had never tried flying himself. He had thought that he would only have the opportunity to do so after reaching the 8th or 9th order, but now he could experience it in advance. Although the flying wing tattoo could only last for a total of 6 hours, what the headmaster said was right. This kind of thing still needed to be practiced before one could grasp the essentials. Otherwise, if one really waited for danger to descend before flying, who knows what kind of mistake would occur. Pushing his spirit chi, Lu Yi poured it into his back and activated the flying wings tattoo. With a loud crash, a pair of fiery red wings appeared on his left and right shoulder blades. These wings weren't thick and were instead somewhat thin, and from the shape of the wings, they looked like the wings of some kind of monster beast. Lu Yi estimated that these wings should be similar to Huafang's. With a thought, Lu Yi flapped his wings lightly, causing a gust of wind to howl. Suddenly, Lu Ye's whole body transformed into a fiery streak of light as he slammed into a certain direction. The headmaster waved his hand and a soft stream of spirit chi wrapped around Lu Yi, holding him in place midair. Looking at a large tree not far in front of him, Lu Ye's forehead dripped with cold sweat. Fortunately, the headmaster was nearby watching over him, otherwise he would have been seriously injured. The headmaster slowly withdrew his spirit chi and Lu Yi once again controlled the spirit chi wings behind him to try to fly. After repeated failures and thrills, Lu Yi slowly began to master the trick and was gradually able to fly steadily, but he still didn't dare to fly too fast, otherwise he wouldn't be able to control himself. After half an hour, Lu Yi completely let go of the flying wings tattoo and flew back and forth in the air, clearly having a lot of fun. Considering the duration of the flying wings tattoo, Lu Yi reluctantly flew down, the fiery red wings behind him slowly disappearing. This flying wings tattoo was definitely an escape tool. The only drawback was that it consumed a lot of spirit chi. After half an hour, Lu Yi felt that he only had about 30% of his spirit chi left, so unless it was absolutely necessary, he couldn't use the flying wings tattoo casually. After waiting for a moment, Hua Ci came out. The headmaster brought Lu Yi forward to say goodbye to Madame Yun. Madame Yun waved her hand and turned around to enter the room. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows at Hua Ci and said, "Do you want to try flying?" The headmaster said that flying requires more practice to master the essentials. Hua Ci happily said, "Okay." As spirit chi surged, a pair of green wings appeared on her back and she slowly floated up. After swaying left and right for a while, she slowly stabilized herself. After a short while, looking at Hua Ci dancing in the sky like a butterfly, the corners of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. Why did people seem a little different? Chapter 184. Inside the station's cultivation room, the spirit gathering array and the three-sided spirit gathering inscriptions were operating at the same time. World energy madly poured into the room, filling it with dense world energy and blood chi. Whether it was world energy or blood chi, they were all being drawn into Lu Ye's body by some kind of force. Not only that, but his abdomen was also emitting a thunderous buzzing sound, which was caused by the gluttonous meal. At a certain moment, Lu Yi opened his eyes and looked down at the back of his hand. The battlefield imprint was slightly hot, and there was a faint surge of heaven's secrets. It was time. He stopped cultivating and got up, took back the scale armor placed on the spirit gathering array, pushed open the door and walked out. A moment later, he arrived in front of the Heaven's Fate pillar in Heaven's Fate Hall. Hua Ci was not here yet. Recently, she and second senior sister had been inseparable, and Lu Yi did not know what she was busy with. However, both women were medical cultivators, so it was likely that second senior sister was teaching Hua Ci something about medical cultivation. While waiting, Lu Yi activated the battlefield imprint and checked his own information. Name, Lu Yi. Identity, Blue Blood Sect Disciple Cultivation, 83 Apertures. Location, Spirit Stream. Battlefield Merit, 26. It had been almost 2 months since the Battle of Golden Light Peak. Since his injuries had healed and the talent tree's ability to burn pill toxins was restored, Lu Ye's cultivation had been increasing day by day. On the day he returned from Madame Yun's place, he had opened 81 apertures, breaking through to the 6th Order Spirit Stream realm. Today, he had opened 2 more apertures. One had to know that this was only because he had been delayed. Previously, when he went to Ing Mountain to find Hua Ci and the others, it took him more than 10 days to go back and forth. If he had not been delayed, his cultivation would have improved even faster. That was because the cultivation environment in the station was much better than before, and it was stable enough. In terms of cultivation, he had reached his expectations, but as for merit, it was a bit of an eyesore. If he hadn't killed a 7th Order cultivator in Yingshan, Lu Yi would only have 5 merit points instead of 26. In the past, Lu Yi did not know what merit points were used for, but now he knew. With a mysterious place like the Heaven's Secret Treasury, merit points were extremely attractive to any cultivator. Not to mention, he still needed to spend contribution points to purchase fuel suitable for his talent tree from the Tianji Treasury. It was foreseeable that he would need a lot of contribution points in the future. It would be far too slow to accumulate merit points by simply killing people, unless one could kill enemies of a higher cultivation level. The Spirit Creek Garrison War was a good place to go. Every sect had a foundational blessing as a bargaining chip. As long as one was strong enough, they would be able to obtain a massive amount of merit points. In fact, Lu Yi was allowed to bring Hu Po with him to the Battle of Spirit Stream. He had already formed a pet contract with Hu Po, so Hu Po was considered his pet beast and a part of his strength. Therefore, he could bring Hu Po with him to the Battle of Spirit Stream. However, neither second senior sister nor fourth senior brother advised him to do so. Because the aftermath of the Battle of Golden Light Summit had just subsided, many people knew that Lu Yi had a big white tiger by his side. If he brought Hu Po in, he would be easily recognized. It would be bad if the myriad demons Ridge besieged him. Rather than taking such a risk, he might as well not bring it. At the very least, he could hide his identity. Indeed, many people on Golden Light Summit had seen Lu Yi before, but there were so many cultivators in the Spirit Creek Garrison War that there were even more who hadn't seen him before or didn't recognize him. A figure slowly appeared at the side, wrapped in a refreshing fragrance. Hua Ci had arrived. Lu Yi looked her up and down and said in surprise, "New clothes? New look?" Hua Ci didn't wear this dress in the past, so it was obvious that she had just changed into it. This was a very tight white dress, and the hem of the white dress was decorated with little red flowers. The pure color made Hua Ci's skin look even more delicate and delicate. However, Lu Yi quickly realized that something was wrong. This wasn't just a beautiful dress. A spirit artifact? Lu Yi raised an eyebrow. Second senior sister gave it to me. She used to wear it when her cultivation was low. She doesn't need it anymore. Could second senior sister's figure support this dress? This dress was perfect for Hua Ci. If she wore it on second senior sister's petite figure, she could probably perform in a big play. Lu Yi was a little jealous. I was the one who entered the sect first. Hua Si pursed her lips and smiled. Second senior sister said that you armament cultivators aren't suited to wear defensive spirit artifacts. Excessive protection will make you lose your sharpness. Lu Yi thought for a moment and nodded. Second senior sister's words make sense. Just as fourth senior brother Li Baxian had taught him before, if he couldn't experience danger and death at close range, how could armament cultivators improve themselves? Relying on external forces for protection would eventually lead to excessive dependence. Lu Ye's head sank and he turned to look. His expression darkened. What are you doing? This woman actually patted his head. Hua Si revealed a gentle smile like an elder sister. Nothing, I just suddenly realized that this is pretty good. Lu Yi lowered his eyes. Didn't anyone tell you that you can't touch a man's head casually? Hua Si looked at him matter-of-factly. What will happen if I touch it? Lu Ye's gaze became fierce. It's starting. Hua Si's expression suddenly became serious and she raised her hand to press on the divine pillar. Lu Yi glared at her hatefully and unwillingly placed his hand on the pillar. The divine pillar surged and the surrounding scenery distorted. The faint sound of waves reached their ears. When everything around them stabilized again, the two found themselves in a strange land. Exchanging a glance, they immediately became vigilant. The next moment, Lu Yi saw two figures not far away. When Lu Yi saw them, the other party also looked over. When their eyes met, both of them wore vigilant looks as they secretly circulated their spirit qi. Lu Yi looked at the auras of the other two and found that they were both seventh-order cultivators. Not only that, the battle marks on the back of their hands were emitting a faint red light, while Lu Ye's and Hua Si's marks were glowing blue. Myriad Demon Ridge. Good start. Of the two people on the other side, a young man in tight robes laughed and rushed forward, apparently feeling quite lucky to have run into two sixth-order masters on his first try. Behind him, the other seventh-order cultivator reminded lightly, "Don't be careless." As he spoke, his spiritual energy surged, and a golden light shot out from his hand, attacking Lu Yi and Hua Si. As soon as they met, he launched an attack. Hua Si leapt to the side while Lu Yi lowered his body and rushed forward. The golden light hit the beach and blasted open a hole. The distance between them was not far to begin with, but as Lu Yi and the young man collided, they quickly closed the gap. Lu Ye's arrogant attitude undoubtedly angered the young man, causing him to draw his long sword and thrust it towards him, preparing to teach Lu Yi a lesson. His long sword flashed like a snake flicking its tongue, giving off a powerful aura. Lu Yi unsheathed his blade, and a fiery red blade light flashed. With a clanking sound, the young man's expression changed abruptly because the power of this blade was incomparably great, almost causing his long sword to fly out of his hand. Is this guy a body cultivator or a weapon cultivator? The sword-wielding young man was puzzled, but his movements were not slow as he gripped his long sword tightly and displayed his full strength. Clanging sounds rang out and sparks flew as the two figures engaged in a fierce battle, but the expressions on their faces were different. Lu Ye's expression remained calm while the sword-wielding young man became more and more shocked, because this sixth-order boy he thought he could easily crush was actually displaying extraordinary combat power. He was surprised to find that he was not his opponent at all. The speed and strength of his opponent's attacks far exceeded his own, and after only a few moments of confrontation, he was already at a complete disadvantage. Every time they collided, his sword would howl in pain and his hand would ache. Is this really a sixth order? The sword-wielding young man seriously suspected that his opponent was wearing some kind of spirit artifact to conceal his cultivation and was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. However, the rules of Heaven's Secret were unquestionable. Since they had appeared in this place, the enemy they encountered should not be stronger than them. After another 3 breaths, the sword-wielding young man felt that he could not hold on any longer, the hand between his thumb and index finger cracking and bleeding profusely. Not daring to hesitate any longer, he quickly took out a golden body talisman and pushed his spirit chi to slap it on his body. This action of his undoubtedly made his weakness even greater. Most weapon cultivators would not use their spirit artifacts in battle because it would affect their own rhythm. Lu Yi raised the mountain blade in his hand, and with a loud clang, the sword in the sword-wielding young man's hand flew out. The sword-wielding young man let out a cry of surprise as he was sent flying backwards. The golden body talisman on his body, which had just taken effect, had completely dimmed as it was directly shattered by the blade. Lu Yi chased after him and swung his blade towards the flying young man's body. While his heart was filled with shock, a look of satisfaction flashed across his eyes. Forming a seal with one hand, the young man's spirit chi surged as he shouted, "Die!" The flying sword immediately turned into a stream of light and fell straight down from the sky, arriving at Lu Ye's back in the blink of an eye. Blood splashed as the sword-wielding young man's eyes filled with panic as a foot-long cut appeared on his body from his crotch. At the same time, Lu Yi was also hit by the flying sword and fell to the beach, his back in pain. Having learned his lesson from the previous incident in Ing Mountain, how could he not be on guard against his opponent's artifact manipulation technique? While his opponent was using artifact manipulation, Lu Yi had constructed a defensive spirit inscription on his back. After a cultivator reached the 7th order, they could cultivate the artifact manipulation technique. On one hand, it would lay the foundation for future artifact manipulation technique, and on the other hand, it would give them an additional means to kill their enemies. Under artifact manipulation, the spirit artifact in one's hand could erupt with even greater power. Hurriedly getting up, the sword-wielding young man was not completely dead yet. Lu Yi flipped the mountain blade in his hand and stabbed it into his chest. When he pulled out the blade, blood spurted out. Without stopping for a moment, Lu Yi rushed towards the Fa Xiao, leaving a series of deep footprints on the wet beach. Fa Xiao used his spirit arts to bombard Hua Ci, putting her in an extremely difficult situation. He thought that his companion would be able to deal with Lu Yi, but the result shocked him. His 7th order companion had been killed by a 6th order brat. Idiot! The Fa Xiao was furious. He did not see clearly what happened just now and only felt that his companion had underestimated the enemy too much. Otherwise, how could a 7th order lose to a 6th order? Chapter 185. Seeing Lu Yi rushing towards him, the spell cultivator no longer cared about Hua Ci. The golden light in his hand changed direction and blasted towards Lu Yi. Lu Ye's figure flickered as he dashed forward. It looked like he was barely dodging his opponent's techniques, but he was actually doing it with ease. His eyesight could see the traces of the techniques that were as fast as the wind, and his movements could follow the instructions given by his mind. As a result, unless it was a technique that covered a large area or was extremely fast, it would be very difficult to hit him. After 3 breaths, the spell cultivator's eyes were filled with shock. That was because the guy rushing towards him had perfectly dodged every one of his techniques. He hurriedly retreated, and at the same time, his spirit energy surged wildly. A large mass of golden light quickly gathered in front of his chest. From the looks of it, he seemed to be about to cast a powerful technique. At that moment, a jade-green arrow-like attack came from the side. The spell cultivator's attention was completely focused on Lu Yi, so he was completely unprepared for this attack. He was hit so hard that he staggered, and the hastily gathered spiritual energy dissipated. Hua Ci had made her move. She was a medical cultivator, but that didn't mean she didn't have the ability to fight. As a rogue cultivator, if she didn't have the ability to fight, she would have died long ago. While she was a medical cultivator, she was also a spell cultivator. However, she didn't know many techniques, so they weren't very powerful. This dark green technique didn't have much killing power, but its effect was very obvious. The 7th order spell cultivator's technique was interrupted. Seeing that Lu Yi was already in front of him, he could only urge the golden light from before to bombard Lu Yi again. Lu Ye's figure flickered, and he easily dodged the attack. The mountain coiling saber slashed down, and a dazzling saber light flashed. The golden light condensed on the spell cultivator's body shattered, and a scream rang out. A huge wound appeared on his chest, and he staggered back. Lu Yi was like a maggot in a tarsal bone. He followed closely and stabbed forward. Under the enhancement of the sharpness spirit inscription, the originally heavy saber light became sharp. The saber pierced through the heart and came out from the back. The cultivator raised his hand and gripped the blade. His eyes were filled with disbelief. At this moment he finally understood that his companion had died not because of carelessness, but because the enemy was too strong. Lu Yi pulled out his blade, and a few severed limbs flew up along with blood. The spell cultivator's body swayed on the spot and fell to the ground. A large amount of blood gushed out from his body. His eyes were wide open, and he died with remaining grievances. When Lu Yi got close enough, with just 2 slashes, a 7th-order Dharma cultivator was killed. This was much easier than killing a weapon cultivator, but it was not easy to kill a Dharma cultivator. At the same level of cultivation, it was very difficult for a weapon cultivator to get close to a Dharma cultivator. Lu Yi had suffered such a loss when his cultivation was not high. But now, it was almost impossible for a spell cultivator of the same level to hurt him. Once he got close to them, they wouldn't have a good ending. 2 red lights flew out one after another and landed on the back of Lu Ye's hand. Looking down, he found that his merit points had increased by 28 points. There were also some other things in his mark. Carefully examining them, he found that they were the blessings of the Heaven's Fate Pillar. Every sect that entered this place had a 500 merit points as a bargaining chip. Killing them would allow Lu Yi to take this bargaining chip. As long as Lu Yi could return to the Blue Blood sect alive, he could choose to place these blessings in his own Heaven's Fate Pillar to increase the aura of his base. Alternatively, he could exchange them for a corresponding number of sect merit points. Sect merit points were different from individual merit points, but the two could be exchanged to a certain extent. Therefore, over the years, every Spirit Stream Garrison battle was a grand event for all the sects of the 9 states. Because of the balance of the Heaven's Fate Pillar, both large and small sects were keen to participate in such a grand event. "Are you okay?" Lu Yi turned his head to look at Hua Xiai. There were no obvious external injuries, but her face was covered in dust. Hua Xiai shook her head. Although her cultivation was lower than the 7th-order Dharma cultivator, it would not be easy for him to kill her. The spirit artifact that her second senior sister had given her had greatly increased her defensive power. Together, they collected their spoils of war and began to investigate the surrounding terrain. A moment later, the two of them stood at the highest point and looked around. They found that this was a small island. The area was not big, only about the size of a square. The vegetation on the island was very dense, but it was surrounded by seawater in all directions. In such a narrow terrain, it was impossible for anyone else to hide. In other words, other than them, there were only the 2 myriad Demon Ridge cultivators who had been killed earlier. The aura on the island was rich, almost the same as in the wilderness of the Spirit Stream battlefield. It was convenient to cultivate and recover after a battle. The chess C. Lu Yi exhaled lightly and confirmed the location of the Spirit Stream garrison battle. The small spaces in every Spirit Stream garrison battle were different. According to the incomplete statistics of the various sects of the 9 states, there were as many as 34 kinds of small spaces that had appeared in the Spirit Stream garrison battle. There were forests, deserts, swamps, plains, and even seas. The Chess Sea was one of the most famous small spaces. This was because there were small islands scattered all over the vast sea, just like chess pieces. The key was that these small islands were not fixed. They were constantly floating in the sea. As time passed, they would constantly merge with other small islands. Eventually, the small islands would become medium islands, and the medium islands would become large islands. In the end, all the islands would merge into one place, turning into a continent. This was an extremely mysterious place, but it was not a friendly place for the cultivators participating in the Spirit Stream garrison battle. If it were any other terrain, the cultivators who were unable to fight could choose to escape to the periphery, find a suitable place to hide, and wait for the Spirit Stream garrison battle to end. However, the Chess Sea was different. As the small islands continued to merge, it was destined that the cultivators of different camps would clash and kill each other. Moreover, the chess sea contained all kinds of dangers, among which were ferocious and huge sea monsters. Therefore, hiding in the sea was not advisable. Moreover, before the small islands were completely merged, they could not take the risk of flying. That was because flying over the sea would consume an extremely large amount of spirit energy. It was possible that they would run out of spirit energy before they could fly too far. Therefore, in the chess sea, even the garrison envoys from the core circle could not take the initiative to attack. Everyone could only obediently wait for the small islands to merge with the others. If the casualty rate of the Spirit Stream garrison battle were to be ranked according to the different small spaces, the chess sea would definitely be in the top 3. Lu Yi did not know what other cultivators would think after knowing that this place was the chess sea, but when he and Hua Ci looked at each other, they could see the joy in each other's eyes. "I'm going to plant some mushrooms," Hua Ci said as she walked towards the center of the small island with a happy expression. Since he was going to participate in the Spirit Stream garrison battle together with Hua Ci, they naturally had some understanding of each other. They were also clear about each other's killing and self-defense methods. Hua Ci did not have many killing methods, and it was very difficult for her to kill a strong enemy in a very short period of time like Lu Yi. However, if she was given enough time and space to arrange things, she would be able to display a strength far beyond the 6th order. Planting mushrooms was her most powerful method. Previously in Ing Mountain, Hua Ci had unknowingly planted mushrooms in the cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge. If Lu Yi had arrived a few days later, Hua Ci would have had the ability to kill the 3 cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge by herself. Moreover, she would have been able to kill them without them knowing. However, because of Lu Ye's arrival, Hua Ci could only hastily activate an incomplete method. Even so, it was enough to throw the 7th order cultivator's mind into chaos. After learning about Hua Ci's ability, Lu Yi was secretly shocked. Who would have thought that a medical cultivator whose duty was to heal the wounded and heal the dying would actually have such a strange method? This also gave him a new understanding of medical cultivators, especially medical cultivators who grew up in the wild like Hua Ci. They might look gentle and kind on the surface, but in fact, they might have the ability to wipe out entire cities and destroy entire nations. It could be said that the small space of the chess sea was extremely friendly to cultivators like Hua Ci. It was also the most suitable place for her to display her abilities. This was Lu Ye's luck. Before coming in, he did not know that the Spirit Stream garrison battle would be held in the chess sea. Hua Ci was busy. Not only was she planting mushrooms, but she was also collecting medicinal herbs. The world energy in the chess sea was extremely dense, suitable for the growth of medicinal herbs. Even if the cultivators did not kill their enemies, collecting medicinal herbs here would still be a source of income. Lu Yi stood guard at the side. The island was only so big that he could see the end of it at a glance, so it was not difficult for him to be on guard. However, he could indeed sense that the island was drifting towards a certain direction at a fast speed. He was very curious as to how the island was floating on the sea. This thing was not a ship, so it could not be empty underneath. Suddenly, the battlefield imprint reacted. Lu Yi checked it and found that it was a message from his 4th senior brother, Li Baxian. As the vice protector of Pill Heart sect, Li Baxian had naturally come to participate in the Spirit Stream garrison battle. He was also in the chess sea, but he was definitely at the very center. In the message, Li Baxian told him all kinds of information about the chess sea. At the end, he warned, "Little junior brother, do what you can. Do not try to be brave." Lu Yi replied and thanked him. Hua Ci had already made the necessary arrangements. Since he had nothing to do, Lu Yi simply switched to his secret art and began to cultivate. There would not be any danger here before it merged with the other islands. 2 hours later, Hua Ci suddenly called out to him. Lu Yi stopped cultivating and rushed to the highest point. Standing next to Hua Ci, he followed her gaze and saw a small black dot moving towards them. The other island was drifting over. Or rather, the 2 islands were attracting each other and moving closer to each other. They were still quite far away, so he could not see the situation clearly for the time being. He also did not know if there were any enemies there. The sea breeze whistled, filling his nose and mouth with a fishy and salty smell. Lu Yi silently estimated that at this speed, the two islands would collide in less than an hour. After some thought, Lu Yi put away the mountain pan saber strapped to his waist into his storage pouch and stood next to Hua Xi. When the distance between the two islands reached a certain point, they suddenly sped up, as if there was some attraction between them. At this distance, Lu Yi could also see the situation on the other island. There were also two people standing on a high point, looking in his direction. Chapter 186. They sized each other up and determined each other's cultivation. There were two seventh-order cultivators on the opposite side. They had sabers and swords at their waists and looked like weapon cultivators. Before they got close, one of the thinner cultivators shouted, "Fellow Taoists, which camp are you from?" "We're from Grand Heaven Alliance." They were not far away yet, so the battlefield marks on the back of each other's hands did not react. However, if they were close enough, the camp they belonged to would be clear at a glance. For example, when Lu Yi and Hua Xi first came here, the battlefield marks on the back of their hands shone faintly when they met two Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators. This was the rule of the Spirit Creek Garrison battle. It was convenient to confirm each other's positions. Lu Yi looked at him expressionlessly and did not answer. The thin cultivator said again, "If it's convenient for you, fellow Taoist, you might as well show us your battlefield marks to avoid accidental injuries." Lu Yi silently circulated her spiritual energy and raised her hand. A fat firebird flapped its wings and flew over. Hua Xi was stunned by the sight of this somewhat bloated firebird. Only then did she follow up with a dark green arrow-like spell. It was the first time she saw Lu Yi use a spirit art. Moreover, it was in this form. If it were not for the inappropriate situation, she would have laughed out loud. Only now did she know why Lu Yi put away his saber just now. The two spirit arts blasted toward the opposite side one after the other. It was not that Lu Yi saw through the other party's lies. It was just that the other party had ulterior motives. In the 9 continents, in the Spirit Creek battlefield, when unfamiliar cultivators met, they would not easily reveal their positions. This was common sense. The other party claimed to be from Grand Heaven Alliance as soon as they opened their mouths. Who knew if they were from Grand Heaven Alliance or not? Moreover, even if they were really from Grand Heaven Alliance, it was fine. After the two islands merged, they could just apologize to the other party. However, if the other party was from Myriad Demon Ridge, then they would be attacking Myriad Demon Ridge. Taking the initiative to attack was nothing more than taking the initiative. Spirit energy exploded. The thin cultivator who shouted was furious. "How dare you sneak attack us? I think you're tired of living." Although they said so, their movements were not idle. Both of them were moving and dodging. Whether it was Lu Ye's Fire Phoenix technique or Hua Xi's Green Arrow technique, their power wasn't great and their speed wasn't fast either. As long as there was a certain distance between them, it wasn't difficult to dodge them. While the two sides were fighting happily, the distance between them was quickly closing. Perhaps they felt that it was too embarrassing to be beaten like this without fighting back. After a short discussion, the two opposite cultivators reached into the storage pouches at their waists and took out spirit talismans. They activated the power of the spirit talismans and attacked Lu Yi and Hua Xi. For a moment, the surface of the sea was extremely lively. Firebirds, green arrows, golden arc slash, and icicles shuttled back and forth, exchanging blows. While fighting back, the skinny cultivator grinned maliciously. "Two little sixth-order cultivators, just you wait, I'll show you what's good for you." As soon as he finished speaking, the bodies of the 4 people from both sides shook as the 2 small islands collided. Lu Yi and Hua Xi swayed left and right in tacit understanding, looking extremely miserable. The 2 opposite weapon cultivators, however, quickly stabilized their bodies. Exerting strength in their legs, they quickly rushed toward the 2 from the left and right. As the distance closed, the marks on the back of the 4 people's hands gradually glowed. The back of the 2 cultivators' hands were glowing red. They weren't from Grand Heaven Alliance, they were from Myriad Demon Ridge. "You're dead." The skinny cultivator's voice was cold. After dodging a few of Lu Ye's techniques, He had already closed in on them. The other cultivator stared at Hua Si, who immediately abandoned Lu Yi and fled in panic. Ha! This scene made the skinny cultivator laugh, as if he was appreciating the scene of a husband and wife who were birds in the same forest flying away in different directions in the face of disaster. After dodging another technique, the skinny cultivator leaped high and unsheathed the long sword at his waist. There was an expression of victory on his face. His cultivation was one order higher than his opponent's, and he was able to close in on a cultivator. Then, he saw Lu Yi reach into his storage pouch and take out a long saber. The skinny cultivator suddenly felt a little uneasy. When Lu Yi drew his saber and the saber flashed, the uneasiness instantly climbed to the extreme and turned into panic. With a clang, the long sword was sent flying. The skinny cultivator, who was in midair and had no leverage, could only watch as the long saber in Lu Ye's hand was covered in fiery red spirit energy. The entire saber seemed to be burning as it slashed down a second time. The skinny cultivator screamed as blood spurted out from his body. He was knocked to the side and one of his arms flew off. Only then did he realize that this sixth-order youth wasn't a cultivator at all. He was also a weapon cultivator. But how could a weapon cultivator cast spells so quickly? It wasn't that he didn't suspect this just now, but the speed at which the other party cast spells dispelled his doubts. It was impossible to cast spells so quickly without a long period of practice. What a treacherous little thief! The skinny cultivator cursed in his heart. He formed a seal with his remaining hand and pushed his spirit energy madly. The long sword that flew out buzzed and trembled before turning into a stream of light. However, before he could urge the stream of light, a saber light flashed in his field of vision and his vitality quickly faded away. It had only been 3 breaths of time since he rushed towards Lu Yi. After Lu Yi beheaded this person, he lifted his foot and chased after him. There, another cultivator was chasing after Hua Si. Although Hua Si wasn't slow, she was still no faster than a weapon cultivator. Just as he was about to be caught, a scream came from behind him, startling him. When he turned his head to look back, he saw Lu Yi aggressively charging towards him. Is my companion dead? How did he die? Also, isn't this boy a cultivator? Why is he holding a saber in his hand? At this moment, one difficult question after another popped up in his mind. He hesitated for a moment between turning around to face the enemy and continuing to chase. Before he could make a decision, he suddenly felt dizzy. Under his feet, a gray mushroom burst, and spores that were almost imperceptible to the naked eye lingered around his body and were sucked into his lungs. Although he didn't know what had happened, he instinctively pushed his spirit chi and dispelled the uncomfortable feeling. In the blink of an eye, Lu Yi had already rushed in front of him. Facing the saber slash, the cultivator could only meet it head-on. Clanging sounds rang out as spirit artifacts collided and sparks flew everywhere. Hua Si, who was running away, stopped running and turned around. Spirit energy surged around her body, and as she did so, the spirit energy around the 7th-order realm cultivator's body began to dim. Lu Yi felt that his opponent's attacks were getting weaker and weaker. At the beginning of the fight, his opponent's performance was no different from other 7th-order cultivators, but after 2 moves, his opponent's strength seemed to be greatly suppressed and his spirit chi fluctuations were on par with Lu Ye's. He could even kill a 7th-order cultivator, let alone a 6th-order cultivator. He wanted to see Hua Si's methods, so he didn't kill him and just kept pestering him. After a while, his opponent's spirit chi fluctuations dropped again, falling to the level of a 5th-order cultivator. Not only that, but what happened in the Ying Mountains happened again. Small mushrooms began to grow out of the cultivator's 7 orifices, looking extremely terrifying. The opponent obviously realized that something was wrong. After forcing Lu Yi back with 1 move, he stood still in a panic and gritted his teeth. What have you done? Is this your limit? Lu Yi looked at Hua Si and asked. That's about it. Then let's kill him. Should I? Killing 1 will give you 14 merit points. My hands are used to save the dying and heal the injured, not to kill, Hua Si said, feeling wronged. I'll fight you to the death. The myriad Devil Ridge cultivator roared and rushed towards Lu Yi. Neither of the two enemies put him in their eyes, discussing the value of his life in front of him. No one could stand such humiliation. However, while he was rushing towards Lu Yi, the small mushrooms in his 7 orifices grew rapidly and then exploded. After a series of explosions, the man's face seemed to be corroded and he fell to the ground. 2 red lights floated towards Hua Si and Lu Yi. The blood flowing out of this man's body wasn't a normal red, but more towards green. Hua Si received merit points, while Lu Yi received the blessing of the heaven's fate pillar. Lu Yi looked up at Hua Si. The woman smiled kindly. "The mushrooms killed him, what does it have to do with me?" Lu Yi was speechless and collected the spoils. When he checked the battlefield mark, he found that this time, he didn't receive 1 blessing from the heaven's fate pillar, but 2. In other words, these 2 myriad demon ridge cultivators had killed a group of people before and snatched the blessings of others, but now they were sent here. After realizing this, Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. In that case, the further he went, the greater the benefits he would receive from killing enemies. In the end, perhaps killing a group of people would give him unimaginable benefits. This was because as those who participated in the Battle of Spirit Creek continued to die, the blessings of the heaven's fate pillar would gather on a small number of people. He checked the small island and found that the 2 small islands weren't really fused together. They were just like 2 pieces of magnets, firmly attached to each other and floating together in a certain direction. Hua Si happily walked towards the small island on the other side. She wanted to plant mushrooms there and turn all the small islands into undetectable traps. This way, no matter who dared to rush over, they wouldn't have a good ending. Lu Yi didn't follow. The enemies had been killed, so there was no danger there. He found that after the small island became larger, the world chi of heaven and earth also became denser. However, he didn't expend too much energy in the battle just now, so he only needed to rest a little. 2 hours later, Hua Si returned. She was humming a song and seemed to be in a good mood. "The power of your mushrooms seems to have increased." Lu Yi asked the doubts in his heart. Back in the Ying Mountains, although Hua Si had planted mushrooms on that 7th order cultivator, they weren't this powerful and didn't take effect so quickly. "Second senior sister gave me some pointers," Hua Si explained. Lu Yi was surprised. "Second senior sister knows about this?" "She doesn't, but she has experience and eyesight. It's not a problem for her to give pointers to a little cultivator like me." "That's true." As if she saw through Lu Ye's thoughts, Hua Si smiled and said, "Every medical cultivator is an expert in using poison. It's just a matter of whether they want to or not. If you don't understand poison, how can you treat people? In the future, when you meet those soft and cute medical cultivators, don't think that they are easy to bully. I never underestimate anyone, not my enemies." Chapter 187. 3 days later, the island that Lu Yi and Hua Si were on was 10 times bigger than the original island. During this period, they had merged with several other floating islands. Some of the islands had enemies, while others were empty. Lu Yi wanted to observe the pattern of the fusion between the islands, but in the end, he found that there was no pattern to speak of. 2 hours after they came here, they encountered the first island. After that, there was no movement for a long time. However, the second and third islands approached almost at the same time. At that time, Lu Yi and Hua Si were nervous. If there were enemies on both islands, then their situation might not be too good. The small islands that came later also suddenly appeared in his field of vision. There was no way to find the pattern. It was as if these small islands were drifting in the sea of chess. When they were close to each other to a certain distance, they would move closer to each other. After killing several groups of cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge and having the experience of working together for the first time, Lu Yi and Hua Si's cooperation became more and more skilled. Every time they encountered an enemy, the two of them would disguise themselves as spell cultivators and greet the other party with spells. If the other party was a weapon cultivator or a body cultivator, they would definitely rush forward. Every time this happened, Lu Yi would give the other party a surprise. However, there were exceptions. Previously, they encountered 2 spell cultivators who enthusiastically exchanged spells with Lu Yi and Hua Si for a long time. The two sides attacked each other with spells, and the fight was extremely lively. In the end, Lu Yi and Hua Ci pretended to be unable to resist and fled back, leading the enemy over. When the enemy stepped into the mushroom area planted by Hua Ci, the outcome was already decided. Once Hua Ci's mushrooms were activated, the spore powder they emitted would invade the enemy's body. The spores, which were too small to be seen with the naked eye, were not fatal. They would only obscure the spiritual energy in the cultivator's body for a short period of time. As a result, the enemy's strength would be greatly reduced. At the same time, those spores would also absorb the spiritual power in the enemy's body and grow in their 7 orifices. However, such a change in the body during a battle was undoubtedly very frightening. The mind would be in chaos, and the spiritual power would become obscure. Their strength would plummet, so how could they block Lu Ye's long saber? Search. It could be said that Hua Ci's method of killing enemies was very complicated. She was not as straightforward as Lu Yi, but it was extremely effective. However, the mushrooms she planted were not without their nemesis. The spiritual power of the fire element could restrain the spores that invaded her body. If someone knew about the trap she had set in advance and used a fire element spell to clean up the area, then all of her arrangements would be destroyed. Over the past 3 days, both of them had reaped some benefits. Although they had not gained much contribution points, they had gained quite a bit of support from the Tianji pillars. After the battle at Spirit Creek Garrison was over, if they could invest all of these support points into the garrison, the Ling Qi in the garrison would definitely improve significantly. Another battle was over. Lu Yi was covered in blood, some from his enemies, some from his own. He gasped for breath as he stood in a pool of blood. Beside him were the corpses of 4 myriad demons ridge cultivators. This time, Lu Ye's luck wasn't too good. 2 people from the Myriad Devil Mountain range had met up. If it weren't for Hua Ci's arrangements, Lu Yi wouldn't have survived. Although he could kill enemies above his realm, he still had his limits. With his current cultivation, fighting 2 7th Order cultivators at the same time was already very difficult for him. Fighting 3 of them would be certain death. Hua Ci's mushrooms had made a great contribution. When the 2 saw that there were 4 people on the other side, they knew that they couldn't fight them head-on. Before the opposite island crashed into them, they didn't even bother to disguise themselves as cultivators and decisively retreated. The size of the island wasn't small, otherwise, they wouldn't have had any room to escape. Following this, 2 people fled while 4 people chased after them. After circling around the island several times, they were finally blocked. While the 4 people were laughing ferociously, Hua Ci used her own method. As she did so, the spirit qi of the 4 people suddenly became obscure and small mushrooms began to form. Lu Yi suddenly attacked and instantly killed one of them. What followed was a battle on the edge of life and death. Although Hua Ci's method worked, the explosive power of the 3 opponents still caused a lot of damage to Lu Yi. Even Hua Ci was hit by an imperial artifact. If it weren't for the spirit artifact dress given to her by second senior sister, her abdomen would have been pierced. After 10 breaths of time, the situation slowly improved because the strength of the enemies was rapidly declining. In the end, they couldn't even use their imperial artifact and were killed one by one. Turning his head to look at Hua Ci, Lu Yi saw blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. Although she was unharmed on the surface, the attack from the enemy's imperial artifact was obviously not something she could withstand. Lu Yi also had several wounds on his body, the most serious of which was so severe that his bones could almost be seen, but overall he was fine. For eyes met, both of them still feeling lingering fear. Hua Ci stepped forward to treat Lu Ye's wounds. A warm, jade-green light enveloped Lu Yi, stopping the bleeding from his wounds. A numbing sensation continued to spread throughout his body. After reaching the 6th Order, Hua Ci's healing ability had obviously improved. After some treatment, although the wounds wouldn't heal so quickly, they were no longer a problem. After dealing with Lu Ye's injuries, Hua Ci began to heal herself. Lu Yi swallowed a healing pill and a spirit accumulation pill, switching his secret art to restore himself while remaining vigilant. When he recovered, he didn't need to close his eyes and meditate like everyone else because the gluttonous meal was operating on its own, so after swallowing a spirit pill, he didn't need to worry about it. This was also the case when cultivating in the station. Others needed to concentrate on their cultivation and absorb the surrounding world energy. Once their state of mind relaxed, it would inevitably affect their cultivation efficiency, but Lu Yi only needed to construct spirit-gathering spirit runes in his spirit apertures and switch his secret arts. He could even attend to other matters. However, under normal circumstances, he didn't have anything to do, so he spent most of his time in a daze or sleeping in the central area of the island, where he and Hua Ci had just appeared. He had already set up a large-scale spirit-gathering spirit rune. This was mainly for Hua Ci's recovery. Her recovery speed wasn't as fast as his, so it would be more efficient if she went there to recover after every battle. In a place where a great battle could break out at any time, it was undoubtedly necessary to maintain the abundance of one's spirit energy. In particular, Hua Ci's mushrooms consumed a lot of spirit energy. Those inconspicuous mushrooms were all produced by using her own spirit energy and some special methods. Now, as the island expanded, the places where she needed to plant mushrooms also increased. However, correspondingly, the density of the surrounding world energy was also increasing. Basically, after every battle, Hua Ci only needed to meditate for a moment to fully recover. As usual, Lu Yi collected the spoils of war. In the previous battle, Lu Yi had received as many as 5 blessings from the 4 myriad demon ridge cultivators. It was obvious that these 4 had killed a lot of Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators. These 4 people must be from 2 different sects. Lu Yi didn't know how they were so lucky to be together. He and Hua Ci had stayed here for a few days and hadn't met anyone from the Grand Heaven Alliance. After collecting their storage bags, Lu Yi dragged the corpses to the seaside and threw them there. These days, Lu Yi had been disposing of the corpses like this. After all, he didn't know how long he would stay on this island and the corpses would become rotten. When the corpses covered in blood fell into the sea, Lu Yi clearly saw countless shadows surging from the sea. In just an instant, the corpses turned into nothingness. Not even the bones were left. He had never seen clearly what those shadows were, but he knew that he couldn't go too deep into the chest sea. Otherwise, he would definitely die. The second corpse was thrown down and disappeared in the blink of an eye. It was the same for the third corpse. Just as Lu Yi picked up the fourth corpse, he suddenly frowned and looked at the sea in front of him. He didn't know when a piece of bone was floating on the sea. The shadows around the bone retreated. Lu Yi stared at the bone and recognized that it was hanging around the neck of the myriad demon ridge cultivator. He had seen it when he was searching the corpses and was sure that it wasn't a spirit artifact or a precious material, so he didn't pay attention to it. But now, it seemed that this thing was a little unusual, because even the shadows under the sea were avoiding it. Lu Yi thought for a moment and put down the corpse in his hands. He lifted the man's lapel and pulled out something from his neck. It was also a piece of bone, the same as the thing floating on the sea. There was no reaction when he poured his spirit chi into it. He pinched it with his hand and found that it was very hard. He was sure that it wasn't a spirit artifact. What was this thing? He thought that the bone had some special meaning to the 2 people, so they each wore one. But now that he thought about it, it seemed that something was wrong. Because the 2 people wearing the bone didn't seem to be from the same sect. Lu Yi vaguely remembered that during the battle, the 2 people didn't cooperate with each other. Instead, they were inseparable. 2 people from different sects were wearing the same pendant. Was it a coincidence? He wasn't in a hurry to throw the corpses into the sea. Instead, he turned around and found a branch. He returned to the seaside and picked up the bone floating on the sea. Then he dealt with the corpses. Without the bone floating on the sea, the shadows under the sea became active again. Holding the 2 bone pieces in his hand, Lu Yi returned to the highest point of the island and studied them while keeping a lookout. An hour later, Hua Ci, who had fully recovered, came up. Seeing the things in Lu Ye's hand, she asked curiously, "What is this?" Lu Yi shook his head and told her what he found. Hua Ci asked curiously, "You're saying that the 2 people from different sects each wore a pendant made of this bone?" Lu Yi nodded and described the characteristics of the two people. Hua Si thought carefully and said, "They really don't seem to be from the same sect. Is it possible that they are actually blood-related brothers? This is their family's heirloom." This speculation was very likely. Who cares what it is? I'll bring it back and let second senior sister have a look, Lu Yi said and put the bone pieces into his storage bag. Hua Si suddenly nudged him with her elbow and pointed in a direction. Lu Yi looked up and his gaze became serious. In that direction, there was a small island not inferior to theirs and it was rapidly approaching. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.